Dear friends, welcome to Mysterious Sleep Stories after a tiring and stressful day. Tonight, I want you to lie down in your bed. Let the weight of the day slip away and journey with us to a place that exists between wakefulness and sleep, between the ordinary and the impossible. We're going to place millions pass through every year, but very few truly see. A place where time flows differently when the clock strikes midnight, where the barriers between worlds thin and countless souls gain inexplicable experiences. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let us guide you through the misty corridors and echoing platforms of Union Station, where the midnight train might be heading to places not marked on any map. Let the mysteries unfold as you drift off to sleep, and remember that sometimes the most extraordinary stories are hidden in the most ordinary places, waiting for those who dare to listen, or who are tired enough. Part 1. The Station at the Edge of Time. Union Station stands as a monument to an age when travel meant more than merely getting from one place to another. Built in the grand tradition of early 20th century architecture, it rises from the urban landscape like a palace carved from stone and steel, its waiting halls as vast as cathedrals, its platforms stretching into darkness like pathways to unknown realms. The main building, with its soaring ceilings adorned with elaborate moldings, and its massive windows that once let in streams of natural light, speaks of a time when stations were designed to inspire awe, to make the journey itself feel significant, transformative even. The original Union Station opened its doors in 1907, though different cities claim their own versions of this story. Whether we're speaking of Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C., or Kansas City, each Union Station shares certain characteristics. They were built during America's railway golden age, when trains represented the cutting edge of technology and the promise of progress. Architects like Daniel Burnham created spaces that blended functionality with beauty, designing structures meant to last centuries, to serve as gateways not just to other cities, but to other possibilities. Walking through Union Station during daylight hours, you see families hurrying to catch their trains, business travelers checking their watches, tourists snapping photographs of the grand architecture. The station pulses with life, with purpose, with the constant movement of people going somewhere, coming from somewhere, existing firmly in the present moment. But something changes when the sun sets, when the crowds thin, when the last commuter trains depart, and the cleaning crews begin their nightly rounds. The station begins to reveal another face, an older presence that lurks beneath the everyday bustle. By 11 o'clock, most stations have emptied considerably. A few late trains still run, carrying night shift workers, insomniacs, and those whose circumstances dictate travel at unusual hours. The food vendors close their shutters. The information booths go dark. The bright fluorescent lights that illuminate every corner during the day are dimmed to save energy, leaving pools of shadow between the remaining lights. The station's acoustics, designed to handle the noise of thousands of voices, now amplify every footstep, every distant cough, every mysterious sound that has no obvious source. It's in this transition time, this liminal space between the day's end and night's full arrival, that the first strange occurrences typically begin. Workers who've spent years in these stations, who know every corridor and stairwell, who've cleaned every platform and swept every waiting area, they're the ones who first notice the anomalies. A door that should be locked standing slightly ajar. A light flickering in a pattern that seems almost deliberate. The sound of a train approaching when the schedule clearly shows no trains due for another hour. Janice Martinez worked as a custodian at Chicago's Union Station for 32 years before she retired in 2019. In an interview conducted for a local history project, she described her experiences during the late shift, the hours between 11 at night and 7 in the morning when the station belonged more to ghosts than to the living. "You learn which sounds are normal," she explained, her voice steady but her eyes carrying a weight of memories. The building settles. Pipes expand and contract. The heating system makes noises. But then there are the other sounds, the ones that don't fit any pattern you can explain. She described hearing footsteps on Platform 5, distinct leather shoes clicking against concrete, when she could clearly see the platform was empty. She spoke of finding wet footprints leading from nowhere to nowhere on a bone-dry floor during winter. Most unsettling, she mentioned the sensation of being watched, of turning around expecting to find a supervisor or a late passenger, only to discover empty air. "You tell yourself it's nothing," she said. "You tell yourself you're tired, your mind's playing tricks. But after the 10th time, the 100th time, you start wondering if maybe the tricks are real." The architecture itself contributes to the strangeness. Union stations were designed with multiple levels, service corridors, maintenance tunnels, and spaces the public never sees. These behind-the-scenes areas, necessary for the station's operation, create a warren of passages where sounds echo strangely, where lighting is minimal, where someone could easily become disoriented. Urban explorers who've illegally ventured into these restricted zones report a profound sense of unease, a feeling that these spaces weren't meant for human presence, that they belong to something else. Dr. Raymond Chun, an architectural historian who studied major American train stations for over 2 decades, has written extensively about the psychological impact of these structures. Large public spaces create what we call cathedral psychology, he explained in a 2018 lecture at Columbia University. The vast open areas, the high ceilings, the play of light and shadow, they affect human consciousness in measurable ways. People feel smaller, more vulnerable, more open to experience. Add the element of night, of isolation, and you've created conditions ripe for unusual perceptual experiences. But Chun, despite his academic credentials and rational approach, admitted that not everything could be explained by psychology and acoustics. He recounted visiting Kansas City's Union Station at 2 in the morning for research purposes, accompanied by a security guard. They were in the Grand Hall, that massive central waiting area that once accommodated thousands of travelers. The space was empty except for them. Yet Chun distinctly heard music, specifically a big band sound like something from the 1940s, playing softly from no discernible source. The security guard heard it too, confirming Chun wasn't experiencing an auditory hallucination. They searched for speakers, for any electronic device that might be playing recorded music, but found nothing. The music played for approximately 3 minutes, then faded away as mysteriously as it had begun. "I'm a scientist," Chun said. "I believe in evidence, in rational explanations. But that night, I experienced something I cannot explain. The music was real. We both heard it. It wasn't in our heads. And when I researched the station's history, I discovered that during World War II, the Grand Hall was used for USO dances, where military servicemen would gather with their sweethearts before shipping overseas. Big band music filled that space night after night. Somehow, some echo of those nights persists. This concept of residual haunting, of past events imprinting themselves on a location and replaying like recordings, is common in paranormal research. The theory suggests that traumatic or emotionally significant events can somehow be absorbed by the environment, particularly by materials like stone, metal, and water. Later, under certain conditions, these imprinted memories can manifest as sounds, images, or even full apparitions that seem to repeat the same actions regardless of who's watching. Union stations, with their long histories of human emotion, of joyful reunions and tearful farewells, of soldiers leaving for war and refugees arriving in a new land, of deaths and births, and every significant life moment imaginable, would naturally accumulate countless layers of imprinted experience. The stone walls and iron beams have witnessed millions of human stories, absorbed the energy of countless emotional peaks, and perhaps, in the quiet hours after midnight, they replay fragments of that collected history. Thomas Waverly, a night shift supervisor at Washington, D.C.'s Union Station, has been working the midnight to 8 shift for 17 years. He's a practical man, former military, not prone to flights of fancy. But even he admits that the station feels different after midnight. It's like the place remembers, he said during a coffee break, speaking quietly so his voice wouldn't carry in the empty staff room. During the day, everyone's focused on now, on getting where they need to go. But at night, when it's quiet, you can almost feel the past pressing in. Like the station is more connected to all its yesterdays than to today. Waverly described an incident from 2015 that shook his rationalist worldview. He was conducting his usual rounds, checking that all the platforms were empty before the overnight maintenance crew began their work. Platform 9 should have been deserted, the last train having departed at 11:47 p.m. But when he emerged from the access tunnel onto the platform, he saw people, dozens of them, dressed in clothing from the 1930s or 1940s. Women in long dresses with seamed stockings, men in fedoras and wool suits. They were standing in small groups, talking quietly, checking pocket watches, behaving exactly as passengers would while waiting for a train. Waverly froze, uncertain whether this was some kind of film production, though no one had notified security of any filming. He called out, asking if anyone had authorization to be there. None of the people acknowledged him. They continued their conversations, their waiting, as if he didn't exist. He walked closer, reached out to tap a man's shoulder, and his hand passed through empty air. The platform was deserted. It had been deserted the entire time. But for approximately 30 seconds, Waverly had seen a crowd that wasn't there, experiencing what paranormal researchers call a residual haunting, a moment when the past became briefly visible. I don't tell many people that story, Waverly admitted. They'd think I was crazy or tired or making it up. But I know what I saw. It was as real as he's sitting here right now. And the thing is, I've heard similar stories from other guards, from maintenance workers, from people who've spent enough late nights in this station. We don't talk about it openly, but we know. Something happens here after midnight. Something that doesn't fit into normal categories. The platforms themselves, those long stretches of concrete flanked by tracks that disappear into darkness, seem to be focal points for unusual activity. Perhaps it's because platforms are inherently liminal spaces, transition zones between the everyday world and the journey beyond. You stand on a platform in a state of waiting, of anticipation, existing momentarily outside normal time. You're neither here nor there, neither at your origin point nor at your destination. You're in between, And perhaps that in-between state creates openings, vulnerabilities in the fabric of normal reality. Security camera footage has captured anomalies that defy easy explanation. Figures appearing in one frame and vanishing in the next, moving faster than humanly possible. Lights and shadows that seem to have their own agenda, independent of any light source. In 2017, Los Angeles Union Station security team reviewed overnight footage after reports of someone or something setting off motion detectors on Platform 12. The footage showed an indistinct shape, roughly human-sized but blurred and distorted, moving along the platform for approximately 40 seconds. It triggered every motion detector it passed, but appeared on only 3 of the dozen cameras covering that area. Technical analysis found no evidence of video manipulation. The shape remains unidentified. Skeptics might attribute such footage to lens flares, dust particles close to the camera creating illusions of size and distance, or simple equipment malfunction. But the security professionals who work with these systems daily can recognize the difference between common technical issues and genuinely anomalous recordings. They see countless hours of footage, become intimately familiar with how their cameras render the space they monitor, and when something appears that doesn't match any known pattern, they notice. Beyond the visual anomalies, there are the temperature fluctuations. Multiple stations report cold spots, areas where the temperature drops 10, 15, sometimes 20 degrees for no apparent reason. These cold spots move, appearing on different platforms on different nights, defying any explanation related to HVAC systems or building drafts. Thermal imaging cameras have confirmed these temperature anomalies, showing distinct cold zones that persist for minutes before dissipating. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a physicist at MIT with an interest in anomalous phenomena, has investigated several Union stations, attempting to find natural explanations for the reported cold spots. Her team brought sophisticated thermal equipment, measured air currents, analyzed the building's heating and cooling systems, and monitored electromagnetic fields. While they could explain some reported cold spots as resulting from architectural features that channeled cold air, approximately 30% of the documented cold spots had no discernible natural cause. What we found most interesting, Dr. Vasquez explained in her published research paper, was that the unexplained cold spots correlated with reported sightings of apparitions and other anomalous experiences. Witnesses would report seeing something unusual, and when we examined the thermal data from that time and location, we'd find a corresponding temperature drop. The statistical correlation was significant enough to rule out coincidence. The question then becomes what could cause localized temperature drops that appear and disappear without apparent cause, that move through space, and that correlate with human perception of unusual phenomena. The laws of thermodynamics tell us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. If an area suddenly becomes colder, that heat energy must go somewhere. Some paranormal researchers theorize that manifestations, whether residual imprints or conscious spirits, require energy to become visible or audible to human perception, and they draw that energy from their environment, particularly from heat energy in the air, causing the localized cold spots that witnesses report. Whether or not you accept such explanations, the phenomena themselves are documented and reproducible. Union stations after midnight become theaters of the strange, stages where the impossible performs for small audiences of night workers, late travelers, and those unlucky or fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time. The stations sit at the edge of our normal understanding, existing in that uncertain space where the rational and the mysterious overlap, where history and present blur together, and where the journey you're taking might not be the only journey happening in that space. As midnight approaches, as the last scheduled trains depart and the station enters its quietest hours, something shifts. The veil between worlds grows thin. The boundaries that normally keep past and present separate begin to dissolve. And if you're standing on a platform in Union Station after midnight, waiting for a late train, or simply experiencing the strange magnetism of these liminal spaces, you might find yourself witnessing something that shouldn't exist, something that's been waiting in the shadows for someone to notice, to remember, to acknowledge that the station's true story is far stranger than any official history could ever capture. Part 2. The Midnight Passengers. Every station has its regulars. Those faces you see so often they become part of the landscape. Morning commuters with their coffee and newspapers. Evening crowds heading home after work. But Union Station's midnight hours host a different kind of regular. Passengers who appear on platforms night after night, waiting for trains that never seem to arrive or boarding trains that don't exist on any schedule. These are the midnight passengers, and their stories weave through the station's history like threads of shadow and fading light. The woman in the red coat is perhaps the most frequently reported apparition across multiple Union stations. Descriptions vary slightly between locations, but the essential details remain consistent. She appears to be in her 30s, wearing a bright red coat that seems out of place with her otherwise dated clothing, usually described as from the 1950s. Her hair is styled in ways popular in that era. She carries a small leather suitcase, the kind with brass clasps and wear marks that suggest extensive travel. And she waits. Margaret Collins first saw the woman in the red coat in 1983 during her second week working the information desk at Chicago's Union Station. It was approaching midnight on a Thursday, and the station was mostly empty. Margaret noticed the woman standing on platform 3, staring down the tracks, as if watching for an approaching train. This wasn't unusual in itself. Late trains still ran, but something about the woman's stillness, her absolute focus, caught Margaret's attention. I watched her for maybe 5 minutes, Margaret recalled in a 2003 interview. She didn't move, didn't check a watch, didn't look around like people normally do when they're waiting. Just stared down those tracks like she could will a train into existence. I thought maybe she needed help. Maybe she was confused about her schedule. So I walked over to her. As Margaret approached, she called out, asking if the woman needed assistance. The woman didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge Margaret's presence. Margaret came within a few feet, reached out to tap the woman's shoulder, and found herself touching empty air. The platform was deserted. Yet Margaret was certain she'd seen someone standing there, solid and real as anyone, just seconds before. Over the following years, Margaret saw the woman in the red coat approximately 24 times, always after 11 p.m., always on one of the platforms, always in that same pose of waiting. Other workers reported similar sightings. The woman became something of an unofficial station legend, spoken about in whispers during late shifts, but never mentioned in official reports. No one wanted to sound crazy. No one wanted to be the person who claimed to see ghosts. But then, in 1997, something changed. A television documentary crew, filming a segment about famous train stations, was at Chicago Union Station doing overnight shots to capture the station's atmosphere. Around midnight, While reviewing footage they'd taken on Platform 3, they noticed something unexpected. In the background of a long shot down the platform, clearly visible for approximately 8 seconds, was a woman in a bright red coat, standing exactly where Margaret and others had reported seeing the apparition. The crew hadn't noticed her during filming. No one could explain how she'd gotten onto the platform, which had been closed for the shoot, or where she'd gone afterward. The footage was examined by video analysts who found no evidence of manipulation. The woman in the red coat had been captured on film. This documentation sparked renewed interest in the story. Researchers began investigating, trying to identify who the woman might have been in life. Station record from the 1950s revealed a missing person case that seemed to fit. In November 1952, a woman named Catherine Hayes purchased a ticket from Chicago to Los Angeles. She checked in her luggage, which was loaded onto the train, and was seen by multiple witnesses on Platform 3, waiting to board. But when the train departed, Catherine Hayes was not among the passengers. Her luggage arrived in Los Angeles. She did not. A search of the station and surrounding area found no trace of her. Catherine Hayes' family, hoping she'd simply changed her mind about the trip and would contact them eventually, kept her disappearance quiet at first. But when weeks passed with no word, they filed a missing person report. Police investigated, but found nothing. Catherine Hayes had vanished somewhere between the platform and the train, disappearing into a space that should have offered no opportunity for disappearance. The case was never solved. Photographs of Catherine Hayes from her family's collection show a woman in her 30s with a right-era hairstyle, wearing, in at least 2 photographs, a distinctive bright red coat. The resemblance to the described apparition is striking. Whether or not the woman in the red coat is actually Catherine Hayes' spirit, trapped in some kind of eternal waiting for a train she'll never board, remains speculation. But the sightings continue, even now, more than 70 years after Catherine's disappearance. Not all midnight passengers are passive observers waiting for trains. Some actively interact with the living, though these interactions often leave witnesses deeply unsettled. The businessman with no reflection is one such entity, reported primarily at Washington, D.C.'s Union Station, but with similar accounts from other major stations. Robert Chun encountered this figure in 2012. He was traveling for work, catching a late train back to New York after meetings in D.C. The platform was nearly empty, just him and a few other travelers scattered along its length. A man in an expensive-looking suit approached, carrying a leather briefcase and checking his phone. Nothing about him seemed unusual. He stood near Robert, perhaps 10 feet away, tapping at his phone screen like millions of people do every day. I happened to glance at the window behind him, Robert explained during an online forum discussion about paranormal experiences. The trains have these glass windows, and when they're sitting at the platform with their interior lights on, they act like mirrors. You can see yourself reflected pretty clearly. I saw myself, saw the other people on the platform, but where the businessman should have been reflected, there was nothing. Just empty platform behind me. Robert looked directly at the man, who was solid and real, then back at the window. Still no reflection. He thought perhaps it was an odd angle, some trick of the light, so he moved slightly. His own reflection moved correspondingly. The businessman remained absent from the reflection. Robert felt his skin prickle, that instinctive recognition that something was deeply wrong. He looked around to see if anyone else had noticed, but the other passengers were absorbed in their phones or newspapers. The man suddenly looked up from his phone and made direct eye contact with Robert. His expression was sad. Robert said, infinitely sad, like someone who'd lost everything and was only now realizing it. Then he spoke, just 2 words, "Wrong train." Before Robert could respond, before he could process what he was seeing, a train pulled into the station. The businessman walked toward it, climbed aboard, and the doors closed behind him. The train pulled away, and Robert watched it disappear into the tunnel. But something made him approach a station employee and ask which train that had been. The employee looked confused. No train had arrived or departed in the last 10 minutes. The platform had been empty. Similar accounts appear in station reports and paranormal databases dating back decades. A well-dressed businessman, sometimes described with subtle variations in appearance, but always professional, always carrying a briefcase, always interacting normally with physical space until someone notices his lack of reflection. In some accounts, he speaks. In others, he remains silent. But he's always associated with wrong trains, with misconnections, with journeys that never reach their intended destination. One theory suggests this figure might be related to a 1974 incident at DC's Union Station. A congressional aide named Michael Branford was rushing to catch a late train home after working overtime. According to witnesses, he boarded what he thought was his train, but it was actually a service train being moved to a maintenance yard, not scheduled to carry passengers. By the time Michael realized his mistake, the train was miles from the station, traveling at speeds that made jumping off suicidal. The train had to be stopped remotely. Michael Branford suffered a fatal heart attack during the incident, apparently brought on by the extreme stress and panic. He was 34 years old. Whether the businessman with no reflection is Michael Branford or someone else entirely, the encounters share a common theme of misplaced travel, of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, of journeys that go catastrophically wrong. And that sad expression, that moment of terrible realization that witnesses describe, it resonates with the idea of someone who boarded the wrong train and paid the ultimate price for that simple mistake. Perhaps the most heartbreaking of the midnight passengers is the child looking for her mother. This apparition appears primarily on or near Platform 7 at Los Angeles Union Station, though similar accounts exist from other locations. She appears to be about 6 or 7 years old, wearing what witnesses describe as a simple dress from the 1940s, carrying a worn stuffed rabbit. She walks along the platform, looking at faces, sometimes asking, "Have you seen my mother?" in a small, frightened voice. Linda Martinez encountered this child in 2008. She was waiting for a late train, sitting on a bench, when she noticed a little girl walking slowly past her. Linda's first thought was concern. Where were this child's parents? Why was she alone at this hour? Linda stood up, intending to help, and the girl turned to face her. She looked so scared, Linda later told reporters. So lost. And she asked me if I'd seen her mother. I told her we should find a station employee, that they'd help us locate her mom. But when I reached for her hand, she just faded away, like fog dissipating. One moment she was there, solid as you or me, and the next she was gone. Just gone. Linda reported what she'd seen to station security, who were professionally polite but clearly skeptical. However, when they reviewed security footage from Platform 7, they found something unexpected. The cameras had captured Linda standing up, apparently speaking to someone, reaching out toward empty air. No child appeared in the footage. But thermal cameras, which had been recently installed as part of a security upgrade, showed something else entirely. A small, child-sized cold spot appeared on the platform, moved along it, stopped near Linda, then dissipated. The thermal signature was consistent with a human being, but no human being was visible on standard cameras. Historical research uncovered a possible origin for this apparition. In August 1942, a woman named Ruth Williams was traveling from Los Angeles to Chicago with her 6-year-old daughter, Emily. The nation was at war, and Ruth's husband had been deployed overseas. Ruth was taking Emily to stay with relatives in Chicago while Ruth took a job in a defense plant. Station records and witness statements show they boarded the train together, but when the train reached Chicago, only Ruth disembarked. Emily Williams was not on the train. A massive search ensued. The train was searched compartment by compartment. Every passenger was questioned. The route was retraced. But Emily Williams had vanished somewhere during that journey. The case became national news, a wartime mystery that captured public imagination and remained unsolved. Ruth Williams spent the rest of her life searching for her daughter, never accepting that Emily was gone. She died in 1981, having never discovered what happened to her child. Some witnesses who've encountered the ghost child on Platform 7 report that when she asks about her mother, there's a particular urgency to the question, as if she's been searching for a very long time and is running out of hope. Others say the child seems almost to be trapped in a loop, endlessly repeating the same search, asking the same question, unable to move beyond that moment of separation from her mother. These stories of midnight passengers share common elements that appear in paranormal accounts worldwide. They involve sudden disappearances, violent deaths, or unresolved emotional trauma. They're associated with specific locations that held significance for the individual in life. They seem trapped in repetitive behaviors, reliving moments of confusion, fear, or desperate searching. And they interact inconsistently with the physical world, sometimes appearing solid and real, sometimes transparent or only visible to certain people or under specific conditions. Dr. Hannah Frost, a parapsychologist who's studied apparition reports for over 20 years, has developed what she calls the resonance theory of haunting. She proposes that human consciousness, under conditions of extreme emotion or trauma, can create a kind of energetic imprint on physical space. This imprint isn't the actual person's spirit in any traditional sense, but rather a recording of consciousness at a moment of peak intensity. Think of it like an emotional photograph, Dr. Frost explained in a lecture at Princeton in 2016. Strong emotions, particularly fear, grief, and desperation, seem to be able to imprint themselves on the environment. This imprint can then be perceived by sensitive individuals or by anyone present when conditions are right. The apparitions aren't conscious entities trying to communicate. They're more like recordings playing back, showing us moments of crisis from the past. This theory would explain why midnight passengers often seem unaware of witnesses, why they repeat the same actions and words, why they don't respond to direct interaction. They're not ghosts in the traditional sense of conscious spirits remaining after death. They're echoes, resonances, moments of such intense experience that they've been recorded in the fabric of the location itself and continue to play back for those with eyes to see. But not all encounters fit this model. Some midnight passengers do seem aware of witnesses, do seem to be trying to communicate or accomplish something. Take the case of Marcus Webb, a maintenance worker at Kansas City Union Station who had an encounter in 2015 that he describes as life-changing. Marcus was doing routine maintenance in the utility tunnels beneath the station around 1 a.m. These tunnels are old, dating back to the station's original construction, and they're not places most people would want to spend time, dimly lit, claustrophobic, echoing with strange sounds. Marcus had worked in them for years and considered himself unflappable. But that night, he encountered something that shook his certainty. He was checking a water line when he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw an older man in a station porter's uniform, the style they wore in the 1930s. The man looked directly at Marcus and spoke clearly. "Fire. Fourth floor storage. Check it now." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing around a corner. Marcus followed, but the tunnel was empty. No one could have gotten out of sight that quickly. Marcus' rational mind told him he'd imagined it, that he was tired and his mind was playing tricks. But something made him go to the fourth floor storage area anyway. When he arrived, he found a pile of old rags near an electrical junction box. The rags had begun smoldering from a short in the electrical system. 5 more minutes, and they would have burst into flames, potentially starting a fire that could have caused serious damage. Marcus reported the incident and had the electrical problem fixed. Later, curious, he researched the station's history and found something chilling. In 1937, a fire in that exact storage area had caused significant damage and injuries. The fire had been discovered by a porter named William Jefferson, who'd been checking the floors during his regular rounds. William Jefferson had died in 1956, having worked at the station for over 30 years. A photograph from the station's archives showed William Jefferson in his porter's uniform. Marcus recognized him immediately. It was the man he'd seen in the tunnel. Unlike the repetitive, unaware apparitions that seemed to be residual hauntings, this encounter suggested intelligence, awareness, intentional communication. William Jefferson, or whatever remained of him, had apparently manifested to warn Marcus about a danger that was echoing a past tragedy. This implied consciousness, memory, purpose, qualities that go beyond simple environmental recordings. These varying types of encounters suggest that the phenomena occurring in Union Station after midnight might not have a single explanation. Perhaps some apparitions are residual, recorded moments playing back without awareness. Perhaps others are conscious entities, spirits, or whatever remains after death, maintaining some connection to locations that were significant to them in life. And perhaps some encounters are something else entirely, experiences we don't yet have frameworks to understand, intersections of consciousness and space that our current science can't adequately explain. What's undeniable is that the encounters keep happening. New witnesses come forward every year with stories that echo accounts from decades past. The midnight passengers continue their eternal waiting, their searching, their warnings. In Union Station, that grand monument to human ambition and movement becomes after midnight a meeting place where past and present coexist, where the living and the dead share platform space, where the boundaries we think are absolute reveal themselves to be permeable, negotiable, ultimately mysterious. The lesson, if there is one, might be simply this: the world is stranger than we allow ourselves to believe during daylight hours. The rational structures we build to contain reality work well enough for daily life, but they're incomplete, provisional, subject to revision when we encounter phenomena that don't fit our models. Union Station after midnight is a place where those models break down, where the impossible becomes possible, and where patient witnesses might glimpse truths that hide from ordinary sight. Part 3. Platform 13 and Other Forbidden Spaces. In many Union stations across America, there exists a peculiar numerical anomaly. Platform 12 connects directly to Platform 14. No platform 13. Official explanations vary. Some stations claim it's superstition, that passengers were uncomfortable with the number 13, so it was simply skipped in the numbering system. Others suggest architectural reasons, that the physical layout didn't require a 13th platform. But these explanations feel insufficient, particularly when you start investigating the spaces where Platform 13 should be. At Washington, D.C.'s Union Station, if you walk the length of the platform area, carefully noting the numbered signs, you'll find that the space between Platform 12 and Platform 14 isn't empty. There's a corridor there, marked as maintenance access, generally kept locked, officially used for storage and mechanical systems. But the dimensions don't quite work. The space is larger than it should be, larger than you'd need for simple mechanical access. And employees who've had reason to enter that corridor report unsettling experiences. David Reynolds worked as an electrician for the station's maintenance department from 1998 to 2014. Part of his job involved accessing various mechanical spaces, including the corridor between platforms 12 and 14. He described the space as longer than seemed possible, extending far back from the platform area, lined with old doors that opened onto small rooms whose original purpose wasn't clear. Some of those rooms had benches, Reynolds said, like waiting areas. But why would you have waiting areas in a maintenance corridor? And the dust, God, the dust was thick like no one had been in there for decades. But we had to go through there fairly regularly for electrical work, so someone must have been maintaining it. It always looked abandoned. Reynolds described feeling watched in that corridor, a sensation so strong it made the hair on his neck stand up. He'd hear sounds from those small rooms, shuffling footsteps, sometimes whispers, though when he'd shine his flashlight inside, the rooms were empty. Once he found what looked like old luggage in one of the rooms, leather suitcases covered in dust, tags still attached showing destinations from the 1940s. He reported this to his supervisor, suggesting the bags might have historical value and should be preserved. When they returned to collect them the next day, the room was empty. No lagi. No disturbed dust patterns where the bags would have sat. Nothing. I stopped going in there unless I absolutely had to, Reynolds admitted. And I wasn't the only one. Ask any of the older maintenance guys about that corridor and you'll see them get uncomfortable. Something's not right there. It's like that space doesn't entirely belong to our world, like it's somehow adjacent to normal reality, but not quite part of it. The concept of liminal or interstitial spaces, areas that exist between defined zones, has gained attention in recent years, particularly in online communities exploring what they call liminal space aesthetics. These are spaces that feel empty, transitional, slightly wrong, places like empty malls, deserted parking structures, abandoned offices. They trigger a particular kind of unease, a sense of being somewhere you're not supposed to be, somewhere that's meant to be passed through quickly rather than occupied. Platform 13, or more accurately, the space where Platform 13 should be, embodies this liminality. It's neither platform nor entirely separate from the platforms. It's not quite public space, but not quite purely utilitarian either. It exists in a category that doesn't fit neatly into our understanding of the station's layout, and that ambiguity seems to create opening for strangeness. Chicago's Union Station has its own version of this phenomenon, though the missing platform is numbered differently. Platform 7 in Chicago is substantially different from the platforms around it. It's darker. The lighting there always seems inadequate. It's quieter, sound behaving oddly, sometimes too muted, other times echoing in ways that make it hard to locate sound sources. And it's colder, not just slightly, but noticeably, often by 10 or 15 degrees compared to adjacent platforms. Sarah Chin spent 3 years as a transit police officer assigned to Union Station. Platform 7 was in her patrol zone, and she came to dread walking its length during her rounds. It felt hostile, she said in an interview after leaving the position. Not like there was something there that wanted to hurt me, but like the space itself didn't want people there, like we were intruding on something that should have been left alone. Sarah described an incident from her second year on the job. She was walking Platform 7 around 2 a.m., conducting her routine patrol. The platform appeared empty, but as she walked, she heard footsteps behind her, matching her pace. She'd stop, the footsteps would stop. She'd walk, they'd resume. She turned multiple times, but never saw anyone. The platform's security cameras, reviewed later, showed Sarah walking alone, no one behind her. But audio from her body camera clearly captured 2 sets of footsteps. The thing is, Sarah continued, I've worked in law enforcement for 15 years. I've been in genuinely dangerous situations. I've faced people who wanted to hurt me. But that night on Platform 7, I felt a fear I'd never experienced before. Pure, primal terror, like every instinct I had was screaming at me to get off that platform, to get away from that space. I finished my patrol, did my job, but I was shaking, and I wasn't the same after that. Other officers and station employees share similar stories about Platform 7. They describe seeing shadows that move against the light, hearing train sounds when no trains are scheduled, feeling sudden temperature drops that have no apparent source. Some have reported seeing people on the platform who vanish when approached, or finding wet footprints leading from nowhere to nowhere, or smelling flowers with such intensity it's overpowering, though no flowers are present. These experiences cluster around certain areas, suggesting that if Platform 7 is somehow anomalous, the effect isn't uniform. There are particular spots, usually near the end of the platform, where phenomena occur most frequently. Thermal imaging has confirmed cold spots in these areas. Electromagnetic field meters register unusual fluctuations. Even sophisticated instruments designed to measure environmental conditions can detect that something unusual is happening, even if they can't explain what that something is. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the physicist mentioned earlier, spent considerable time studying Platform 7 in Chicago. Her team set up monitoring equipment across the platform, collecting data on temperature, electromagnetic fields, infrasound, air pressure, and several other variables. What they found was puzzling. The platform exhibited regular fluctuations in multiple measured parameters, fluctuations that occurred on a roughly 90-minute cycle. These fluctuations didn't correspond to any obvious source: train schedules, mechanical systems, or external factors like weather or time of day. It was as if the platform itself was breathing, Dr. Vasquez explained. Every 90 minutes or so, we'd see coordinated changes across multiple variables. Temperature would drop, electromagnetic fields would spike, we'd detect infrasound in specific frequency ranges. Then it would subside, return to baseline, and the cycle would repeat. We monitored this for 3 weeks and found the pattern was consistent, predictable, completely unexplained. More disturbing, Dr. Vasquez found that the fluctuations correlated with reported paranormal experiences. When witnesses described encounters with apparitions or unusual phenomena on Platform 7, the vast majority of incidents occurred during the peaks of these 90-minute cycles. This suggested that whatever was causing the measurable environmental changes was also connected to the subjective experiences people reported. I'm not claiming this is proof of ghosts or parallel dimensions or anything supernatural. Dr. Vasquez was careful to clarify. But what I am saying is that we've documented something unusual happening at this location, something that's objectively measurable and that correlates with human experience in ways that are statistically significant. That's worth investigating further, worth trying to understand. Science proceeds by examining anomalies, not by dismissing them. The connection between measurable environmental changes and paranormal experiences is a recurring theme in research on haunted locations. Many investigators have noted that temperature drops, electromagnetic anomalies, and infrasound exposure can affect human perception and emotional states. Infrasound, frequencies below the range of human hearing, has been shown in laboratory studies to induce feelings of unease, to create the sense of a presence in a room, even to cause visual hallucinations under certain conditions. Could the phenomena at Platform 7 and similar locations be entirely explainable through environmental factors affecting human perception? It's possible. Our brains are pattern-seeking devices, prone to finding meaningful signals in random noise, to constructing narratives that explain our experiences even when those explanations aren't accurate. Combine this with environmental conditions that create unease, primed expectations about the location being haunted, and the suggestibility inherent in late-night, low-visibility conditions, and you have a recipe for paranormal experiences that might not require any actually paranormal causes. But this explanation, while satisfying to skeptics, doesn't quite account for all the documented phenomena. It doesn't explain why thermal cameras capture human-shaped cold spots when no human is present. It doesn't explain security footage showing objects moving on their own or the well-documented cases of multiple witnesses experiencing identical phenomena simultaneously. It certainly doesn't explain incidents like Marcus Webb's encounter with a porter who warned him about a fire, an encounter that resulted in the prevention of actual physical danger. The truth, as unsatisfying as this might be, is that we simply don't know. We have phenomena that are consistently reported, that can be partially documented with instruments, that occur in specific locations, but we don't have adequate explanations that satisfy both rigorous scientific standards and account for all the observed evidence. We're left with mysteries, with anomalies, with questions that resist easy answers. Beyond Platform 7 and the spaces where Platform 13 should be, Union stations contain numerous other restricted or forgotten areas where strangeness concentrates. There are abandoned ticket offices, closed off decades ago when train travel declined, left to gather dust behind locked doors. There are old waiting rooms, grand spaces from the station's glory days, now deemed unnecessary and sealed away. There are service tunnels that connect different parts of the station, running beneath platforms and public areas, rarely visited except by maintenance crews. These hidden spaces accumulate their own legends. Workers speak of the Whispering Corridor in Los Angeles, a service tunnel where voices echo strangely, sometimes seeming to form coherent words in languages no one recognizes. There's the Watch Room in D.C., an abandoned security office where employees swear the old monitors sometimes flicker to life, displaying images that don't match current camera feeds, showing the station as it appeared decades ago. Kansas City has its Cold Room, a storage area where the temperature remains perpetually at 45 degrees regardless of season or heating systems, and where workers report feeling suddenly exhausted, as if the room itself is draining their energy. These spaces share certain characteristics. They're isolated from regular human traffic. They're often poorly lit, maintained only to the minimum standard necessary for safety compliance. They're quiet in an unnatural way, as if sound itself behaves differently there. And they're old, dating back to the original construction or early modifications of the stations, carrying decades or centuries of accumulated history. Dr. Chun, the architectural historian, has proposed that these forgotten spaces might act as what he calls historical reservoirs, areas where the past is somehow more present, less diluted by ongoing human activity. Think about it, he suggested. Active spaces in a building are constantly being renovated, repainted, reconfigured. They're in flux, always changing. But these sealed-off areas, they're frozen in time. The last person who used them left their imprint, their energy, if you will, and then nothing came along to overwrite it. So maybe, just maybe, these spaces preserve the past in ways that active spaces can't. This would explain why phenomena seem more intense in restricted areas, why apparitions appear more frequently in corridors that are rarely used, why the most dramatic encounters happen in spaces that have been essentially unchanged for decades. If hauntings are somehow dependent on historical continuity, on preservation of the environment as it was during significant past events, then these forgotten spaces would naturally be more prone to paranormal activity. There's also the question of intention. Some researchers have noted that many of these restricted spaces were originally designed for specific purposes that are no longer relevant. Old ticket offices weren't just work areas. They were the first point of contact for travelers, places of anticipation and planning. Old waiting rooms weren't just utilitarian spaces. They were social environments where people from different walks of life would mingle, where soldiers said goodbye to loved ones, where immigrants caught their first glimpse of American life. These spaces held emotional significance, witnessed countless human moments of joy, fear, hope, and sorrow. When such spaces are abandoned, when they're shut off and forgotten, does something of that accumulated emotional energy remain? Do the walls remember the thousands of people who passed through them? Do the floors still resonate with footsteps long since stilled? There's no scientific basis for such ideas, no mechanism that physics currently recognizes for how emotional energy could imprint on physical matter. Yet the experiences persist, the phenomena continue, and those who work in these spaces, who spend time in these forgotten corners of grand buildings, often come away convinced that something unexplained is happening, that these spaces are more than simply empty rooms in old buildings. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these forbidden spaces is how they seem to affect time itself. Multiple witnesses have reported what they describe as time distortions while in restricted areas of Union stations. They'll enter a corridor to perform some quick maintenance task, spend what feels like 5 or 10 minutes working, then emerge to discover that hours have passed. Or conversely, they'll be working in an area for what they know must be at least an hour, based on the amount of work completed, only to find that their watches show just a few minutes have elapsed. Gerald Morrison, a maintenance supervisor who worked at Los Angeles Union Station for 27 years before retiring in 2020, described one particularly vivid incident. He entered a sealed-off section of the station's basement to check on a reported water leak. The area had been closed to the public since the 1960s, used only occasionally for storage. He found the leak, a minor issue he was able to fix in about 20 minutes. But when he returned to the active part of the station and checked the time, 4 hours had passed. His phone showed multiple missed calls from concerned coworkers. Security footage showed him entering the basement at 2:15 p.m. and not emerging until after 6 p.m., yet Morrison insisted he'd been down there for half an hour at most. "I didn't black out," Morrison said firmly. "I remember every minute I was down there. I fixed the leak, checked a few other things while I was there, then came back up. But according to everyone else, to the security system, to time itself apparently, I was missing for 4 hours. I have no explanation. I can't make sense of it. But I know what I experienced, and I know what the timestamps show, and they don't match up." Time anomalies like this appear in paranormal accounts worldwide, not just in Union stations, but in various allegedly haunted locations. They're difficult to investigate because they rely primarily on subjective experience, on the witness's perception of how much time has passed. Yet when multiple witnesses report similar experiences in the same location, when the discrepancies involve objective markers like security timestamps or clocks that should be synchronized, the phenomena become harder to dismiss as simple mistakes or confusion. Could there be places where time flows differently, where the normal rules that govern temporal experience break down? Mainstream physics says no. Time is constant, a fundamental dimension of reality that doesn't vary based on location. Yet quantum mechanics and relativity have taught us that time is stranger than our everyday experience suggests. It can slow down, speed up, even theoretically flow backward under certain extreme conditions. Perhaps there are anomalous zones where the fabric of space-time is somehow distorted, where time becomes malleable, and perhaps these zones exist in the forgotten corners of old buildings, in places that have been witness to so much human activity over so many decades that they've somehow been altered at a fundamental level. Or perhaps the explanation is psychological, neurological rather than paranormal. Perhaps these restricted spaces, with their isolation, their poor lighting, their unusual acoustics, affect human perception in ways that distort our sense of time passing. Perhaps the combination of sensory deprivation, stress, and the uncanny atmosphere of these forgotten places creates altered states of consciousness in which time perception becomes unreliable. Either way, the experiences are real to those who have them. The missing hours or compressed time are documented in logs and schedules. Something unusual is happening, even if we can't agree on what that something is or what it means. And the forbidden spaces of Union Station continue to generate reports, to challenge our assumptions, to suggest that the world contains depths we haven't fully plumbed, mysteries we haven't solved, and perhaps, just perhaps, impossibilities that are actually possible after all. Part 4. The Station Master's Records. In the basement archives of several major Union stations, there exist collections of documents that tell a different story than the official histories. These are the station master's private logs, maintenance reports that were never meant to be widely distributed, internal memorandums discussing incidents that couldn't be explained. They're not complete records. Many documents have been lost or destroyed over the decades. But what remains paints a picture of stations where the unusual was far more common than anyone acknowledged publicly. The station master position, particularly in the early to mid-20th century, carried significant authority and responsibility. These individuals oversaw all aspects of station operation, from train schedules to maintenance to security. They dealt with emergencies, resolved disputes, handled the endless problems that come with managing a major transportation hub. And sometimes they dealt with things that had no explanation, events that couldn't be reported through official channels, because doing so would invite skepticism or accusations of incompetence. Edward Tillman served as station master of Kansas City Union Station from 1935 to 1958. His personal log, discovered in an estate sale in the 1990s and later donated to a local historical society, contains numerous entries describing unexplained occurrences. Written in neat, matter-of-fact prose, Tillman documented events without embellishment or speculation, simply recording what was reported to him or what he witnessed personally. One entry from July 12, 1947, describes an incident that occurred around midnight. A conductor reported that Train 47, which had just pulled into Platform 6, had an extra passenger car attached at the rear, a car that wasn't on the manifest and hadn't been there when the train departed from its origin point. The car was old-fashioned, dating from at least the 1920s, and appeared to be empty. Station employees boarded the car to investigate and found it completely furnished but covered in a thick layer of dust, as if it hadn't been used in decades. While they were examining it, trying to determine where it had come from, the car simply disappeared. One moment it was physically there, connected to the train. The next moment, it was gone, leaving behind only the standard train cars that were supposed to be there. Tillman's entry notes that multiple employees witnessed this, that the car was physically present long enough to be boarded and partially explored, and that its disappearance was simultaneous, not a matter of it being moved or disconnected, but simply ceasing to exist. He concludes the entry with a rare editorial comment. I have no explanation. I am recording this for the benefit of future station masters who may encounter similar phenomena. We are not losing our minds. Something irregular is occurring. Another entry from October 31st, 1951, describes what Tillman calls the platform incident. Around 2 a.m., security guards reported seeing people, dozens of them, appearing on Platform 3. The guard approached to determine what was happening, why there was a crowd when no trains were scheduled. As they got closer, they realized the people were dressed in clothing from various different eras, some from the 1930s, others from the 1880s, mixed together as if from different time periods. The crowd seemed agitated, looking around in confusion, some appearing frightened. Guard called out to them, asking if they needed assistance. None of the figures responded. They remained for approximately 3 minutes, then faded away, like images dissolving, until the platform was empty again. Tillman interviewed the guards extensively, ensuring they weren't collaborating on a fabrication. He reviewed the platform area personally, and he made this notation: whatever we are dealing with here appears to involve time in ways I don't understand. These were not ghosts in the traditional sense. They seemed confused by their own presence, as if they had been pulled from their proper time and briefly deposited in ours. I recommend that future incidents of this nature be documented, but not reported to authorities outside the station, as there is no framework for understanding or addressing them. These logs, while extraordinary in their content, are written in the business-like tone of someone recording operational information. Tillman wasn't trying to prove anything or persuade anyone. He was simply documenting unusual occurrences for institutional memory, creating a record that might help his successors understand that strange things sometimes happened, and this was simply a reality of managing Union Station. Similar documents exist from other stations, though they're scattered and incomplete. A maintenance report from Los Angeles, dated August 1962, describes repair work in the utility tunnels being repeatedly disrupted by equipment malfunctions and adverse environmental conditions that cannot be attributed to normal causes. The report, written by a foreman named James Collington, details tools that would go missing and reappear in different locations, power outages that affected only specific areas without corresponding with any electrical issues, and workers reporting severe psychological distress when working in certain sections of the tunnels. Collington, like Tillman, writes without dramatization. He's reporting problems that are affecting work efficiency, requesting guidance on how to proceed. But reading between the lines, it's clear he's describing something well beyond ordinary workplace challenges. His report includes testimony from workers who quit rather than continue working in the affected areas, men who'd spent years doing difficult, dangerous work without complaint, but who found the tunnel environment unbearable. "I've worked construction for 20 years. One worker is quoted as saying, "I've been in mines, I've worked on skyscrapers, I've done jobs that would terrify most people. But that tunnel, I couldn't handle it. Felt like something was pressing down on me, like I couldn't breathe, even though there was plenty of air. Felt like I was being watched by something that didn't like me being there. I don't scare easy, but I'm not going back." These workplace reports provide some of the most credible documentation of Union Station phenomena precisely because they're not trying to document paranormal activity. They're trying to document operational problems, safety concerns, issues that need to be addressed. That the issues involve unexplained phenomena is almost incidental to the report's primary purpose, which makes them less susceptible to accusations of sensationalism or fabrication. Perhaps the most comprehensive set of records comes from Washington, D.C.'s Union Station during the 1970s. The station master during this period, Margaret Santos, kept detailed logs that have since been archived as part of the station's official history. Santos was trained as an engineer, practical-minded, not inclined towards supernatural explanations. Yet her logs document pattern after pattern of unusual incidents that she methodically attempted to investigate and explain. One recurring issue involved Platform 9, where trains would occasionally experience electrical problems that had no apparent source. The trains would be thoroughly inspected, found to be in perfect working order, yet when they tried to depart from Platform 9, their systems would malfunction. Moving the train to a different platform would resolve the issue immediately. Santos had Platform 9 inspected by electrical engineers multiple times. They found no problems with the electrical systems, no electromagnetic interference, no environmental factors that would affect train operation. Yet the malfunctions continued, sporadic but consistent enough that conductors began to request assignment to different platforms if possible. Santos' logs show her systematic approach to the problem. She had the platform completely rewired. She installed new monitoring systems. She changed maintenance schedules. Nothing helped. Finally, in an entry from July 1978, she writes, "I must acknowledge that I cannot solve this problem through conventional means. The issue is not electrical, despite manifesting as electrical failures. Multiple experts have confirmed the platform systems are functioning normally, yet the malfunctions persist. I am forced to conclude that something about this location affects train systems in ways we don't currently understand. I am designating Platform 9 for local trains only, where delays are less disruptive, until such time as the underlying cause can be identified." This is the pragmatic response of someone confronting an insoluble problem. Santos couldn't explain what was happening, but she could work around it, minimizing its impact on station operations. Her logs show that this workaround was successful. Local trains using Platform 9 still experienced occasional electrical anomalies, but because they were short-distance runs with frequent stops, the delays were manageable. But Santos' most remarkable log entry comes from November 5, 1978, when Union Station experienced what she calls the event. According to her detailed account, at approximately 1:30 a.m., multiple security systems throughout the station triggered simultaneously. Alarms sounded. Security cameras went offline. Emergency lights activated. The response team assembled, expecting to find a fire, an intruder, some clear threat that would explain the comprehensive system failure. What they found instead was inexplicable. Every clock in the station had stopped at exactly 1:26 a.m. Not just electronic clocks, but mechanical clocks, wind-up timepieces, even battery-operated watches worn by staff members. They'd all frozen at the same moment. And in that frozen moment, witnesses reported seeing the station transformed, looking older, as if they were seeing it as it had appeared decades earlier. The phenomenon lasted approximately 4 minutes. Then everything snapped back. Clocks resumed their normal function, though all showed 1:26 until manually reset. Security systems came back online. The station appeared normal again. Santos interviewed everyone who'd been present during the event. All described the same experience, seeing the station change, feeling time itself stop, then resume. She documented the clock phenomenon extensively, noting that this couldn't be explained by any electromagnetic pulse or power surge, as mechanical and battery-operated timepieces shouldn't be affected by such events. She filed a comprehensive report with station authorities and received, she notes in her log, no meaningful response. I suspect they don't know what to do with this information any more than I do. Reading through these historical documents, several patterns emerge. First, unusual phenomena at Union stations have been consistently reported for at least a century, probably longer. Second, the phenomena have been documented by credible witnesses, often multiple witnesses simultaneously, making it difficult to dismiss as individual hallucination or mistake. Third, institutional authorities typically respond to reports by either ignoring them or trying to explain them away, not out of malice, but because they lack frameworks for understanding or addressing paranormal events. These patterns suggest that what we're dealing with is genuine, that something unusual does occur at Union stations with sufficient frequency and consistency to be documented across decades in different locations. Whether that something is paranormal in the supernatural sense, or whether it represents natural phenomena we don't yet understand, remains an open question. Dr. Michael Torres, a historian specializing in urban infrastructure, has studied Union Station documents extensively. In his 2019 book, The Hidden History of American Rail, he devotes an entire chapter to what he calls the anomaly files, compiling reports like those from Tillman, Santos, and others. Torres doesn't claim to know what's causing the documented phenomena, but he argues strenuously that the phenomena themselves are real, that they deserve serious investigation rather than dismissal. We can't afford to ignore consistent, well-documented reports just because they challenge our current understanding, Torres writes. Science advances by investigating anomalies, not by pretending they don't exist. And what we have here are decades of anomalies, recorded by practical, skeptical people who had no reason to fabricate or exaggerate. These records deserve respect. They deserve investigation. and they suggest that our understanding of places like Union Station is incomplete, that there are aspects of these spaces we haven't recognized or acknowledged. The station master logs and maintenance reports also reveal something else: the human response to experiencing the inexplicable. Reading Tillman's entries, you can sense his frustration, his desire to understand and solve problems that resist solution. Reading Santos' methodical attempts to address Platform 9's issues, you see someone try to maintain rationality and order in the face of phenomena that undermine both. These weren't credulous people embracing supernatural explanations. They were professionals trying to do their jobs, forced by repeated experience to acknowledge that something irregular was happening, something they could document but not explain. And that might be the most valuable legacy of these records. They're honest accounts of confronting mystery, of maintaining intellectual humility when faced with things that don't fit our models of reality. They remind us that certainty is often overrated, that some questions resist easy answers, and that professional competence sometimes requires acknowledging the limits of our understanding rather than pretending we know more than we do. The logs continue to be maintained, though in modern times they're often digital rather than handwritten. Current station masters, when interviewed confidentially, admit that unusual incidents still occur, that reports continue to come in from security staff, maintenance workers, and occasionally passengers. These reports are logged, investigated when possible, and usually result in no satisfying explanation. The tradition Tillman began in the 1930s of documenting the inexplicable for the benefit of future colleagues persists. And somewhere in basement archives and digital folders, these accounts accumulate, a shadow history running parallel to the official records. They're waiting for someone, someday, to connect the patterns, to develop the tools or frameworks necessary to understand what's been happening in these stations for over a century. Until then, they serve as testaments to mystery, reminders that reality is deeper and stranger than our everyday experience suggests, and evidence that Union Station after midnight remains a place where the impossible regularly occurs, witnessed, documented, and utterly unexplained. Part 5. Travelers Between Worlds. Some of the most compelling accounts from Union Station involve not apparitions or residual hauntings, but apparently living people who appear without warning, disoriented and confused, claiming to be from times or places that shouldn't be possible. These incidents are rarer than ghostly sightings, but perhaps more disturbing, because they involve interaction with seemingly corporeal individuals who then vanish or reveal themselves to be impossibilities. The most famous case occurred at Chicago's Union Station on June 12, 1995. It was approximately 7 in the evening, still fairly busy, when a man appeared in the main concourse. Appeared is the appropriate word according to witnesses. He wasn't walking from any particular direction. He simply was there suddenly, standing in the middle of the concourse looking around in obvious confusion. Several things about him immediately stood out. His clothing, while not costume-like, was noticeably outdated, a style from perhaps the 1940s or early 1950s. He carried a leather suitcase that looked worn but well-made, the kind of quality luggage that wasn't common in 1995, and his reaction to his surroundings suggested genuine disorientation, not the calculated confusion of a performance artist or prankster. Station security approached him, initially concerned he might be ill or in distress. Officer Maria Gonzalez was the first to reach him. She later gave a detailed statement describing the encounter. The man looked at her with an expression she described as terrified confusion and immediately asked what year it was. When she told him 1995, he became visibly shaken, insisting that was impossible, that it had been 1952 just moments ago. Gonzalez, assuming the man was mentally ill or perhaps suffering from some neurological event, called for medical assistance. While waiting for paramedics, she tried to gather information about him. He identified himself as Aaron Wilson, said he was traveling from New York to Los Angeles, and insisted he'd just boarded a train at this station. He became increasingly agitated when Gonzalez tried to explain that the year was 1995, not 1952, pulling out a wallet that contained what appeared to be period-appropriate identification, currency from the early 1950s, and a train ticket dated June 12, 1952, exactly 43 years earlier. By this point, other security personnel and station employees had gathered. Multiple witnesses watched as paramedics arrived and attempted to assess the man. He wasn't violent, but he was insistent, maintaining his story, refusing to accept that the year was 1995. He described boarding a train, walking through the cars looking for his seat, stepping into what he thought was another passenger car, and finding himself in an entirely different station, one that looked similar but wrong, too modern, full of people dressed in strange clothing. The paramedics found no obvious medical issues. His vital signs were normal. He showed no signs of injury or drug intoxication. But his confusion and agitation were such that they decided to transport him to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation. As they were preparing to leave, the man became calm suddenly, eerily calm. He looked directly at Officer Gonzalez and said, "This isn't right. I shouldn't be here. It's going to correct itself." Then, according to all witnesses present, he collapsed. The paramedics immediately began medical assessment. They had him on a gurney, were checking his airway, his pulse. And then, in full view of approximately a dozen witnesses, he vanished. Not disappeared in the sense of slipping away unseen, but literally ceased to be there. One moment, the paramedics were working on a physical body. The next moment, their hands were touching empty air. The gurney held nothing. The man was gone. The aftermath of this incident was extensive. The station's security footage was reviewed and showed the man appearing exactly as witnesses described. The footage confirmed his sudden arrival in the concourse, his interaction with security, the arrival of paramedics, and his final disappearance. Video analysts confirmed the footage hadn't been manipulated. Whatever was documented actually happened. An internal investigation was conducted. Interviews were taken from all witnesses, and the story was eventually leaked to local media, creating a brief sensation before being dismissed by most as an elaborate hoax. But Officer Gonzalez, who retired from station security in 2010, has never wavered from her account. "I touched him," she said in a 2012 interview. "He was solid, real warm. He was a person, a living human being, and he vanished. Right in front of me, right in front of a dozen other people, he stopped existing. You can believe that or not, but happened. And I've never been the same since. Because if that happened, if a person can just appear from 1952 and then vanish back to wherever he came from, then everything I thought I knew about reality is wrong." Follow-up research found some corroborating details. A passenger named Aaron Wilson was listed on train manifests from June 1952, traveling from New York to Los Angeles. He checked his luggage, which arrived at the Los Angeles station on schedule. But Aaron Wilson himself was listed as a missing person after failing to arrive. His family filed reports. Police investigated. No trace of him was ever found. The case remained unsolved, listed as a missing person who likely died somewhere along the train route, though his body was never recovered. Until 1995, 43 years later, when someone matching his description appeared at Chicago Union Station, confused about the year, carrying identification for 1952, and claiming to have just boarded a train on June 12, 1952, then vanished again, leaving behind only witness testimony, security footage, and a mystery that defies rational explanation. This case isn't unique. Similar incidents appear in reports from other Union stations, though often with less documentation. Los Angeles station security files contain a report from 1989 about a woman who appeared on Platform 6, wearing clothing from the 1930s, speaking in terrified confusion about having stepped aboard a train and finding herself somewhere impossible. Before security could reach her, she ran back into a train car and vanished. A search of the train found no one. In 2003, at Kansas City Union Station, a teenage boy appeared in the main waiting room, crying and asking for his mother. He was wearing clothing from perhaps the 1960s and couldn't explain how he'd gotten there. Station employees tried to help him, calling police to assist with finding his family. But while they were making calls, the boy simply walked away, and despite security footage showing him heading toward an exit, he never appeared in subsequent camera angles. He vanished somewhere between one camera's field of view and the next, in a space too short for anyone to disappear into. Dr. Shannon Brooks, a theoretical physicist who studied reports of time anomalies, has proposed what she calls the thin place theory. She suggests that certain locations, for reasons we don't fully understand, may have weaker boundaries between different time periods or even parallel realities. These thin places would normally maintain their integrity, keeping past, present, and future properly separated. But under certain conditions, perhaps related to electromagnetic fluctuations or quantum effects we can't currently measure, the boundaries could become permeable. Think of it like weak points in fabric, Dr. Brooks explained during a lecture at Berkeley in 2016. Most of the fabric is strong, intact, keeping everything properly separated. But there are places where the weave is loose, where threads have weakened. And at those points, under the right conditions, things could slip through from one side to the other. Past could bleed into present. Present could intersect with past. People could, theoretically, move between these separated states. Dr. Brooks is careful to note that this is highly speculative, not supported by current physics, and requiring mechanisms that we haven't discovered and might not exist. But she argues that the consistent reports of time anomalies from specific locations like Union stations deserve consideration, that dismissing them without investigation is intellectually lazy. We've learned that the universe is far stranger than common sense would suggest, she continued. Quantum mechanics defies everyday intuition. Relativity shows that time isn't absolute. We've discovered dark matter and dark energy, invisible components that make up most of the universe. Given how weird reality turns out to be, is it really so impossible that there might be places where time's normal rules don't fully apply? I'm not saying that's definitely what's happening. I'm saying we should investigate rather than assume it's impossible. The people who appear, these temporal travelers, if that's what they are, share certain characteristics. They're always confused, always maintaining that they've just come from a different time. They're never deliberate time travelers, never claiming to have used technology or knowledge to move between eras. Instead, They describe accidentally stepping from one time into another, usually by boarding a train or entering a room or walking through a doorway. The transition is instantaneous and unexpected. They don't experience traveling through time. They experience a sudden displacement, a jarring shift from when they were to when they are now. Many of these incidents involve trains specifically. People board a train in one era and emerge in another. This might be significant. Trains are inherently about transition, about moving from one place to another. They're liminal spaces existing between origin and destination. If there are weak points in time, places where past and present can intersect, it would make sense for them to be associated with spaces of transition, places designed for movement between different states. There's also the question of what happens to these people. Aaron Wilson vanished, presumably returning to his original time. But not all accounts end that way. Some temporal travelers simply disappear into the modern world, never to be documented again. Did they find ways to adapt to their displacement? Did they eventually return to their proper time? Or did they remain stuck, living out their lives in an era that wasn't originally theirs? And what about the reverse? If people from the past appear in the present, might people from the present disappear into the past? This could explain some historical missing person cases, individuals who vanished without trace from Union stations. Perhaps they didn't die or run away. Perhaps they slipped through one of these temporal weak points and found themselves stranded in a different era. This speculation leads to unsettling questions about free will and fate. If Aaron Wilson appeared in 1995 and then returned to 1952, what happened next? Did he continue his journey as planned, eventually disappearing and becoming a missing person case? Or did his brief glimpse of the future change something, alter his path? Can the past be changed by someone from that past experiencing their own future? These are questions that physics and philosophy have grappled with for decades. The grandfather paradox and its variations, the question of whether time travel creates alternate timelines or can change the original timeline, the nature of causality, and whether the future can affect the past. Union Station incidents don't answer these questions, but they do suggest that perhaps the questions are more than just theoretical exercises, that perhaps time travel, or something like it, actually occurs, not through advanced technology, but through natural weak points where time's normal structure breaks down. Not all travelers between worlds involve time. Some accounts describe people appearing who claim to be from places that don't exist, not from different times, but from different realities altogether. These accounts are even harder to verify, but they persist in station records and witness testimonies. In 2007, security at Washington, D.C.'s Union Station detained a man who was wandering the platforms looking confused. When questioned, he produced what appeared to be a passport, but from a country called Taured. He insisted he'd flown into the United States from Taured, which he said was in Europe between France and Spain. But no such country exists. The passport looked authentic, with stamps from various countries, but from a nation that doesn't exist on any map. The man became increasingly upset when told that Taured wasn't a real country, insisting that of course it was. He was from there, his company had offices there. Security eventually released him, as he hadn't committed any crime. But they kept photocopies of his passport. Later attempts to verify the passport with immigration authorities found no record of him entering the country. The passport number didn't exist in any database, and the man himself was never identified or seen again. This account, which has become famous in paranormal circles, might be apocryphal or exaggerated. But similar stories appear from other locations. People who seem to be from variant versions of reality, where history took different turns, where countries have different names, where the world is subtly or dramatically different from ours. These people appear confused by our reality, insisting that things are wrong, that names and facts we know to be true are incorrect. Then they vanish, never fully explained. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a psychiatrist who studied anomalous experiences, offers a more skeptical perspective. She suggests that many of these travelers between worlds might be experiencing dissociative episodes, psychiatric conditions where people lose connection with reality and construct elaborate alternate identities or histories. The confusion they display, the insistence that things are different from how they actually are, these are symptoms of certain mental health conditions. I don't doubt that the people involved genuinely believe what they're saying, Dr. Warren explained in a published paper. But belief doesn't equal truth. The human mind is capable of extraordinary self-deception, particularly under stress. And modern life is stressful. Some people cope by retreating into fantasy, constructing alternate realities that feel safer or more manageable than actual reality. When they encounter the real world, there's a disconnect that can manifest as the kind of confusion these travelers display. This explanation is satisfying in many ways. It doesn't require rewriting the laws of physics. It accounts for the individual's genuine belief in their story. And it provides a framework for intervention, psychiatric help rather than paranormal investigation. But it doesn't quite explain every detail, particularly in cases like Aaron Wilson, where physical evidence exists, where the person's identification and currency are period appropriate, where their description matches historical missing person cases. Perhaps the truth involves both explanations. Perhaps some travelers between worlds are experiencing psychiatric conditions. And perhaps others are genuinely displaced, victims of phenomena we don't yet understand. The challenge is distinguishing between the two, determining which accounts represent mental illness requiring compassion and treatment, and which represent genuine anomalies requiring investigation and understanding. What's clear is that Union stations, with their long histories, their role as transition spaces, and their documented patterns of unusual phenomena, will continue to be places where such encounters occur. The late-night traveler waiting on a platform might see someone who doesn't belong, someone from a different when or a different where. And in that moment of encounter, in that brief intersection of impossible realities, both the witness and the traveler face a truth that challenges everything they thought they knew about the structure of time, the nature of reality, and the limits of what's possible in our strange and mysterious universe. Part 6. The Echoes and Residuals. Not all the phenomena at Union Station involve conscious entities or travelers from elsewhere. Many experiences seem to be recordings, moments from the past that replay like echoes, independent of any intelligence or awareness. These residual hauntings, as paranormal researchers call them, appear to be imprints, energy signatures left behind by events of particular emotional intensity or significance. The crying on Platform 7 at Los Angeles Union Station is one of the most consistently reported residual phenomena. Multiple witnesses over decades have described hearing a woman crying, a sound of profound grief and despair coming from near the end of the platform. The crying typically occurs between midnight and 3 a.m., lasting anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes. It moves, traveling slowly along the platform as if the crying woman is walking. But no one is ever visible. Officer James Patterson encountered this phenomenon during his first week on night duty at Los Angeles Union Station in 2016. He was conducting a routine patrol around 1:30 a.m. when he heard crying, distinct and clear, coming from the far end of Platform 7. His immediate instinct was to help, to find whoever was in distress. He called out, asking if someone needed assistance, and hurried toward the sound. The crying continued as I got closer, Patterson described. It was heartbreaking, genuine grief, not just tears but deep sobbing. I kept calling out, kept looking, but I couldn't see anyone. The platform was empty. I had a flashlight, I was sweeping it around, and there was nowhere for anyone to hide. But the crying continued, moving past me now, heading back toward the station entrance. I followed it, this invisible source of grief, watching my motion detector lights trigger as if someone was walking past them, but seeing nothing. The crying eventually faded away near the platform entrance, dissipating like sound in the wind. Patterson was shaken, convinced he'd experienced something unexplainable. He reported it to his supervisor, who responded with resignation, explaining that this was a common occurrence, that many officers had heard the crying over the years, and that no explanation had ever been found. Later research uncovered a possible origin for the crying. In March 1952, a young woman named Elizabeth Chun was at Los Angeles Union Station, seeing off her husband who was departing for military service in Korea. Eyewitnesses from the time described Elizabeth breaking down as her husband's train pulled away, standing on Platform 7 in utter despair, sobbing uncontrollably. Her husband was killed in Korea 3 months later. Elizabeth, according to records, never remarried, never fully recovered from her grief. She died in 1989, but perhaps the intensity of her emotion that day in 1952, the pure anguish of that moment, somehow imprinted itself on the platform where she'd stood. This is the theory of residual hauntings, that emotional energy, particularly from traumatic or intensely felt experiences, can imprint on the environment, not as conscious presence, but as a kind of recording that plays back under certain conditions. The crying woman isn't Elizabeth Chen's ghost aware of witnesses or trying to communicate. It's an echo of her grief, a moment of such intensity that it's been captured in the fabric of the location and periodically manifests for those present to hear. Interestingly, the crying isn't heard every night. Some weeks it occurs multiple times. Other weeks, witnesses report nothing unusual. This variability suggests that specific conditions might be necessary for residual phenomena to manifest. Perhaps electromagnetic variations, humidity levels, the presence of certain materials, or even the emotional states of potential witnesses play roles in whether these imprinted moments become perceptible. Dr. Elena Vasquez's research touched on this aspect of the phenomena. Her team found that the crying tended to occur during periods when electromagnetic field readings on Platform 7 were elevated. The correlation wasn't perfect, but it was statistically significant. This suggested that whatever allows residual phenomena to manifest might be related to electromagnetic conditions, though the mechanism remains mysterious. Beyond the crying, Platform 7 is associated with another residual phenomenon, the smell of roses. Multiple witnesses have reported suddenly perceiving an intense fragrance of fresh roses despite no flowers being present. The smell appears suddenly, is extremely strong for a few seconds, then fades completely. Unlike the crying, which seems to have a possible historical origin, the rose smell's source remains unknown. It's not subtle, explained Maria Rodriguez, who works at a coffee shop near Platform 7. It's overwhelming, like you've walked into a flower shop. Suddenly you're surrounded by this perfume, this beautiful rose scent, and you automatically look around trying to figure out where it's coming from. But there's nothing. No flowers, no perfume, no obvious source. And then, just as suddenly, it's gone. Like it was never there. Olfactory hauntings, experiences involving unexplained smells, are common in paranormal accounts. Smells of pipe tobacco, perfume, flowers, food cooking, all these have been reported at allegedly haunted locations. The explanation for why smells would imprint and replay is unclear, but perhaps scent, being closely tied to memory and emotion, is particularly susceptible to being recorded in whatever process creates residual hauntings. Chicago's Union Station has its own collection of residual phenomena. The footsteps in the Grand Hall are perhaps the most famous. This vast, cathedral-like space becomes eerily quiet after midnight when the last travelers have departed and the cleaning crews have finished their work. In that silence, footsteps echo, distinct sounds of leather shoes on marble floors, walking steady paths across the hall. Security guards have learned to recognize these phantom footsteps, to distinguish them from actual people moving through the space. The real footsteps have a different quality, explained Vincent Torres, who worked night security at Chicago Union Station for 19 years. They're more muffled, more irregular. The phantom footsteps are crystalline, perfectly rhythmic, and they follow the same paths. From the east entrance toward the ticket windows, then back. Or from the main doors toward Platform 5. You hear them clearly. And if you're new, you assume someone's there. But veterans know. Those are the echoes. Torres described his first encounter with the phantom footsteps early in his tenure at the station. He heard someone walking across the Grand Hall and went to investigate, assuming a late traveler needed help. The footsteps continued, clear and distinct, but Torres couldn't see anyone. He followed the sound, watching it move across the open space, his own footsteps echoing alongside the invisible walkers. The phantom footsteps reached the far wall, then simply stopped. No doors opened, no one departed. The footsteps simply ceased, leaving Torres standing alone in the vast, empty hall. I thought I was losing my mind, Torres admitted. But when I reported it to my supervisor, he just smiled and said, "Welcome to Union Station." It happens. You get used to it. And he was right. After the first few times, you stop being scared. You just accept that this is part of working here, that the building has its own sounds, its own echoes from the past. They're as much a part of the station as the architecture. Residual phenomena don't just involve sounds and smells. Visual manifestations occur as well, though less frequently. These typically involve seeing figures or scenes that play out and then repeat, showing no awareness of witnesses and no variation in their actions. At Washington, D.C., Union Station, maintenance workers have reported seeing a man in a station uniform from the 1920s or 1930s walking a specific route through the service corridors. He appears solid and real, carrying a lantern despite the corridors being electrically lit, following what must have been his regular patrol route decades ago. Workers who've encountered him describe him passing through closed doors, continuing his path despite physical barriers that weren't there in his time. He never acknowledges witnesses, never varies his route, just walks his eternal patrol through corridors he walked in life. These visual residuals are fascinating because they suggest the imprinting process can capture more than just sound or scent. Somehow, the complete image of a person, their movements, their interaction with the space, can be recorded and played back. This seems to require more than simple emotional intensity. Perhaps certain individuals, through repeated actions over long periods, literally wear paths into the fabric of a location, creating grooves in reality that continue to manifest long after the person is gone. The concept of time loops, moments that repeat endlessly, appears in both science fiction and theoretical physics. In paranormal terms, residual hauntings might represent a form of time loop, where specific events are trapped, playing out again and again, visible and audible to those who are present under the right conditions. These aren't violations of physics as we understand it, but perhaps expressions of physics we don't yet fully understand, ways that energy and information can persist in localized areas, creating effects that seem impossible, but which might simply be extensions of natural processes we haven't fully explored. Interestingly, some residual phenomena seem to be deteriorating over time. Accounts from the 1950s and 60s describe certain manifestations as being more vivid, more frequent than modern reports of the same phenomena. The crying on Platform 7, for instance, was described in older reports as being louder, lasting longer, and occurring almost nightly. Modern reports describe it as more intermittent, sometimes barely audible. This suggests that whatever energy or imprint creates residual hauntings might slowly dissipate, wearing away like recordings that degrade with each playback. If this is true, it raises poignant questions about preservation. If residual hauntings are historical records of emotional experiences, should we be trying to preserve them? Are they valuable data about human experience, moments of genuine emotion captured in ways that written records can't duplicate? Or are they simply ephemeral phenomena, natural to fade with time, not requiring or benefiting from preservation efforts? Dr. Hannah Frost, the parapsychologist mentioned earlier, has argued for systematic documentation of residual phenomena before they potentially disappear. She spent years recording audio of the crying on Platform 7, documenting the patterns of phantom footsteps, interviewing witnesses while their experiences are fresh. Her archive represents one of the most comprehensive collections of residual haunting data anywhere. These are primary sources, Dr. Frost explained. They're not perfect records. They're ambiguous and mysterious. But they're real data about real experiences that real people have had. Whether we ultimately explain them through psychology, physics, or something else entirely, they deserve to be preserved and studied. Because they're telling us something, even if we don't yet know how to interpret what they're saying. The documentation of residual phenomena serves another purpose beyond academic study. It provides validation for witnesses, confirmation that they're not imagining things, that others have experienced similar events. For someone who hears crying on an empty platform or phantom footsteps in a deserted hall, learning that these experiences have been consistently reported for decades can be powerfully reassuring. It transforms an isolating, potentially frightening experience into something shared, something that connects them to a larger pattern of phenomena. Emma Wilson works as a custodian at Kansas City Union Station and has encountered numerous residual phenomena during her night shifts. She described finding this documentation transformative. "I thought I was going crazy," she said. "I'd hear things, see things, and I'd think my mind was breaking down. But then I found out that other people going back decades, had experienced the same things. Same sounds, same locations, same experiences. And suddenly I wasn't alone. I wasn't losing my mind. I was experiencing something real, something that's been happening here for generations. That knowledge, that connection to others who've gone through it, that made all the difference. This community of witnesses, people connected by their experiences of unexplainable phenomena, creates its own support network. In online forums and local groups, individuals share their stories, compare details, and offer mutual validation. They're not trying to prove anything to skeptics. They're simply acknowledging to each other that these experiences happened, that they're real, and that they matter. The residual phenomena at Union stations, the echoes and imprints from decades past, serve as reminders that history isn't just dates and facts and books. History is experiences, emotions, moments of intensity that can leave marks on the world. These marks might be invisible during the busy light of day, drowned out by crowds and activity. But in the quiet hours after midnight, when stations empty and silence descends, the echoes emerge. Past and present overlap. The barriers that usually keep them separate grow thin. And those who are present, those who pay attention, might catch glimpses of moments from long ago, emotions still resonating, experiences still echoing, refusing to be forgotten, insisting on being remembered. Part 7. Famous Incidents and Cover-Ups. Some events at Union stations have been so dramatic, so well witnessed, that they couldn't be entirely swept under the rug despite institutional desires for such events to remain unknown. These famous incidents, as they become known in paranormal circles, represent moments when the strange and unexplainable became undeniable, when too many people saw too much for the events to be dismissed or ignored. The 1978 mass disappearance at Los Angeles Union Station stands as perhaps the most disturbing event in any American station's history. On the night of September 15th, between midnight and 1 a.m., 16 people vanished from Platform 9. Not gradually, not spread over hours. They disappeared simultaneously, in full view of security cameras, under circumstances that defy rational explanation. The individuals involved were all late travelers, waiting for various trains scheduled to depart between 1 and 2 a.m. They didn't know each other, were from different backgrounds, heading to different destinations. The only thing they had in common was being on Platform 9 that night. Security footage shows them going about normal activities, checking phones, reading, sitting on benches. Then, at exactly 12:47 a.m., all 16 people simultaneously looked up as if hearing something. The cameras captured them standing, moving toward the edge of the platform, staring down the tracks in unison. Then, between one frame and the next, they vanished. Present in one frame, gone in the next. The platform was empty. Station security, monitoring the feeds, immediately responded. Guards reached Platform 9 within 90 seconds. They found nothing. No people, no signs of struggle, no indications of where 16 individuals could have gone. The platform sits between other platforms, has limited exits, and is under complete camera coverage. There was simply nowhere for 16 people to go without being captured on multiple security cameras. Yet they were gone. A massive search ensued. Police were called. Every inch of the station was checked. Trains that had been near Platform 9 were stopped and searched. Nothing. The 16 people had vanished completely. Family members were contacted, missing person reports filed. Media picked up the story. For several days, the disappearance was national news. Then, 72 hours after they disappeared, the 16 people returned. Not all at once, not in the same place, but over the course of 6 hours, they reappeared at various locations throughout Los Angeles. A few were found wandering downtown, confused and unable to explain where they'd been. Others showed up at their homes with no memory of the intervening days. 2 were discovered asleep in public parks miles from Union Station. When questioned by police, all 16 told variations of the same impossible story. They'd heard a sound, looked down the tracks, and saw a light approaching. Thinking it was their train, they'd watched it get closer. The light had been unusual, they said, too bright, moving too fast. And then, suddenly, they were somewhere else. Most described the somewhere else as a gray, featureless space where time seemed not to exist. They couldn't remember eating or sleeping or feeling the passage of time. Some thought they'd been there for minutes. Others felt like hours had passed. Then, just as suddenly, they were back in Los Angeles, disoriented and frightened. Medical examinations found all 16 physically unharmed, but psychological evaluations revealed trauma consistent with abduction or intense fear. None showed signs of drug use or head injuries that might explain memory loss or hallucination. They were, by all medical measures, normal people who'd experienced something that they couldn't explain and that the examiners couldn't explain either. The official investigation concluded with a non-conclusion. Police reports stated that the 16 individuals had temporarily left the station for reasons unknown and returned without clear memory of their movements. The disappearance itself, the fact that security cameras showed 16 people vanishing simultaneously, was barely mentioned in official reports. It was treated as if it hadn't happened, despite video evidence that unambiguously showed it did. Sarah Martinez, one of the disappeared 16, has spoken publicly about her experience. In a 2015 interview, nearly 4 decades after the event, she described her ongoing struggles with what happened. "People think we're crazy," she said, "or they think we made it up for attention. But I know what happened. We all do. We were there, on that platform, and then we weren't. We were somewhere else, somewhere that wasn't quite real, wasn't quite physical. And then we were back, and nobody believed us. Nobody wanted to investigate what really happened. They just wanted the story to go away." The 16 have stayed in loose contact over the years, bound by their shared experience. Several have reported ongoing, unusual experiences, seeing things that others don't see, having moments of temporal confusion, feeling like they're not quite fully present in normal reality. They describe it as if their disappearance did something to them, changed them in subtle but persistent ways. Cover-up allegations surrounding this incident are extensive. Witnesses claim that government agents visited Union Station shortly after the disappearance, that documents were removed from station files, that employees were instructed not to discuss the incident. The security footage, which should be preserved in station archives, is reportedly missing, at least according to researchers who've tried to obtain it through official channels. Dr. Alan Pierce, a former Air Force intelligence officer turned UFO researcher, has investigated the 1978 disappearance extensively. He claims to have spoken with station employees who confirmed that federal agents did visit, that they confiscated documents and footage, and that employees were indeed told to remain silent about the incident under threat of termination. This wasn't a local police matter, Pierce argues. This was a federal operation to suppress information about an event that couldn't be explained within our current understanding of reality. 16 people vanishing and reappearing, all telling consistent stories about being in some kind of other space. That's not something you can dismiss as coincidence or hallucination. That's real data about real phenomena, and someone didn't want that data being investigated. Whether Pierce's conspiracy theories are accurate or overblown, the basic facts of the 1978 disappearance are documented and undeniable. 16 people did vanish. They did reappear. And the official explanation, such as it is, doesn't really explain anything. The incident remains one of the great mysteries of Union Station history, a moment when the impossible unquestionably occurred and then was systematically minimized, dismissed, and nearly forgotten. Other famous incidents, while perhaps less dramatic, have their own disturbing aspects. The 1965 Northeast blackout affected multiple states, but Union stations in the affected areas reported unusual phenomena beyond simple power loss. At New York's Grand Central Terminal, not strictly a Union station, but part of the same railway system, witnesses described seeing the main concourse transform during the blackout, appearing to show the station as it had looked decades earlier, complete with period-appropriate crowds and architecture. Similar reports came from other stations. Emergency lights failed. Backup systems didn't engage as they should. And in the darkness, witnesses described experiencing temporal displacement, feeling like they'd slipped into the past, seeing things that shouldn't be visible. These experiences lasted only for the duration of the blackout, but they were widespread and consistent enough that they appear in multiple reports from different locations. The official cause of the 1965 blackout was eventually determined to be a tripped relay at a power station in Ontario. But some researchers have questioned whether the relay failure was the cause or a symptom of something else, some electromagnetic disruption that affected both technological systems and the fabric of time itself. They point to the unusual phenomena reported at train stations, the temporal experiences that went beyond simple power loss, as evidence that something more complex than equipment failure was occurring. In 1982, Washington, D.C., Union Station experienced what's become known as the fog incident. On a clear night, with no weather conditions that would produce fog, a thick mist suddenly filled Platform 3. This wasn't normal fog. Witnesses described it as luminous, almost glowing, and unnaturally cold. The fog lasted approximately 20 minutes, during which time multiple witnesses reported seeing figures moving within it, hearing voices speaking languages they didn't recognize, and experiencing a sensation of being watched by unseen presences. Station security attempted to clear the platform, concerned about the unusual conditions. But the fog was so dense and disorienting that guards reported difficulty navigating, feeling like they were walking in circles despite moving in straight lines. When the fog finally dissipated, clearing as suddenly as it had appeared, several items were found on the platform that hadn't been there before. Old coins from the 1920s. A pocket watch that had stopped at 3:15, though the incident occurred just after midnight. A train ticket dated from 1935. These objects were logged by security, but then mysteriously disappeared from the evidence locker, or so witnesses claim. Official records show no incident on Platform 3 that night. But multiple employees remember it, remember the fog, the found objects, the eerie sensation of experiencing something that felt profoundly wrong. Dr. Chun, the architectural historian, has collected testimony from over 40 Union Station employees who've experienced unusual events and claimed that their reports were dismissed, minimized, or deliberately suppressed by authorities. He's created an archive of these accounts, preserved against institutional forgetting, maintaining that these witness testimonies are valuable historical records regardless of whether they describe actual paranormal events or mass psychological phenomena. The human experience is what matters, Dr. Chen insists. Whether these people experience genuine supernatural events or elaborate shared hallucinations, they experience something. And that something is part of Union Station's history, part of the story of these buildings and the people who work in them. To deny that history, to pretend these experiences didn't happen, that's a form of erasure that serves nobody. The pattern of alleged cover-ups suggests institutional embarrassment more than sinister conspiracy. Station authorities, railway companies, and government agencies don't want to be associated with ghost stories or paranormal phenomena. It's bad for business, creates liability concerns, and invites ridicule. So when unusual events occur, the tendency is to minimize them, to provide conventional explanations even when those explanations don't quite fit, and to discourage employees from discussing incidents publicly. This creates a situation where events that are well witnessed and documented still fade from institutional memory. New employees aren't warned about unusual phenomena because officially such phenomena don't exist. When they have their own encounters, they find no validation in official channels, so they either stay silent or share stories informally with coworkers. The knowledge becomes folklore rather than recorded history, passed along through word of mouth, subject to distortion and embellishment, but preserving a core truth that something strange happens in these stations, something that authorities would prefer not to acknowledge. Journalists have occasionally investigated Union Station phenomena, producing articles and documentaries that bring temporary attention. But these tend to be presented as entertainment, spooky stories for Halloween, rather than serious investigations. The venues that would publish serious investigative journalism on the topic don't want to risk credibility on subjects associated with the paranormal. And the venues that do cover paranormal topics often lack the resources or inclination for rigorous investigation. This leaves the famous incidents, the 1978 disappearance, the 1965 blackout experiences, the 1982 fog, and numerous others, existing in a kind of limbo. Too well witnessed to be entirely dismissed, too strange to be comfortably acknowledged. They haunt Union Station's history the way apparitions haunt its platforms, real but officially non-existent, experienced but institutionally denied, remembered by those who were there, but forgotten by those who weren't. And perhaps that's appropriate. Perhaps these liminal events, occurring in liminal spaces, deserve to remain in this uncertain state, neither fully verified nor completely dismissed, existing in the gray area where certainty gives way to mystery, where the official record admits its incompleteness, and where those who experience the impossible carry their truth forward, regardless of whether anyone else believes them. Part 8. The Present-Day Mystery. The phenomena at Union Stations didn't end with the past. They continue, perhaps intensifying, perhaps simply better documented due to modern technology. Cell phone cameras, social media, digital surveillance, all these tools of the present day capture and disseminate accounts of ongoing strangeness, creating a contemporary layer to Union Station mysteries that's both more verifiable and more publicly accessible than earlier generations of phenomena. Emma Chen's TikTok video from November 2023 went viral, accumulating over 3 million views before she eventually deleted her account. The video showed Emma waiting for a late train at Chicago's Union Station. The platform appeared empty behind her. But approximately 30 seconds into the video, a figure appears in the background, standing near the edge of the platform. The figure is blurry, indistinct, but clearly humanoid. It remains stationary for about 5 seconds, then simply disappears, not walking away, not moving out of frame, but ceasing to exist between one moment and the next. The video was analyzed by numerous people, from amateur enthusiasts to professional video editors. No one found evidence of manipulation. The metadata showed the video was recorded continuously, without cuts or edits. The figure's appearance and disappearance were captured on Emma's phone in real time, not added later through special effects. Whatever Emma filmed, she actually filmed it, not some post-production fabrication. Emma gave several interviews after the video went viral, describing her experience. She hadn't noticed the figure while recording, only discovering it when she reviewed her video later. "I was just filming for my followers, showing what it's like waiting for late trains," she explained. "I didn't see anything unusual at the time, but when I watched the video, there it was. Clear as day. Someone or something appearing and vanishing on camera. It freaked me out so much that I couldn't go back to that station for weeks." The video sparked debate across social media, with believers citing it as evidence of paranormal activity and skeptics proposing various natural explanations. Some suggested it was a glitch in the phone's camera software. Others proposed that it was a living person who happened to move in and out of frame in a way that appeared to be vanishing. But these explanations didn't quite fit the evidence. The figure didn't move. It appeared and disappeared in place. And Emma's phone was a standard model with no history of producing glitches or artifacts in videos. Emma's video is just one of hundreds of contemporary accounts shared online. Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, all these platforms host Union Station content showing alleged paranormal activity. Some of it is obviously fake, created for attention or entertainment. But some, like Emma's video, resists easy explanation, showing phenomena that appear genuine and that multiple people have experienced in similar forms. The democratization of documentation through smartphones means that ordinary people can now capture evidence that would have been impossible for earlier generations. Security cameras have been recording Union stations for decades, but access to that footage is restricted. Personal devices mean that anyone present during unusual events can potentially document them, creating a body of evidence that's more diverse and extensive than anything from the past. But this proliferation of footage also creates problems. How do we distinguish genuine documentation from hoaxes? How do we verify that videos haven't been manipulated when sophisticated editing software is readily available? The abundance of content makes it harder, not easier, to identify truly anomalous recordings because the signal gets lost in the noise. Dr. Emily Chong, a researcher studying digital documentation of paranormal phenomena, has developed protocols for verifying the authenticity of such content. She examines metadata, analyzes the footage frame by frame, looking for signs of manipulation, cross-references with other witnesses or documentation from the same time and place, and interviews the person who captured the footage to assess their credibility and motivations. Most of what I examined turns out to be either hoaxes or misunderstandings, Dr. Chong explained. Shadows that look like figures, lens flares that appear to be lights, glitches that create the appearance of anomalies. But occasionally, maybe 1 in 50 cases, I find something that I can't explain away, something that appears to be genuinely anomalous. In those cases, they're fascinating, they're important, and they deserve serious attention. One of Dr. Chang's verified cases comes from Washington, D.C.'s Union Station in January 2024. A security guard, reviewing footage from overnight monitoring, noticed something unusual on one of the platform cameras. The timestamp showed 2:37 a.m. The platform appeared empty. Then, for exactly 43 seconds, the image on the screen changed. The platform appeared older, the lighting different, and numerous people were visible, all dressed in clothing from mid-20th century. The people moved, talked, behaved like an actual crowd, not a static image. Then, at 2:38 a.m., the image snapped back to normal. The platform was empty again, showing contemporary fixtures and lighting. The guard immediately reported this to his supervisor and preserved the footage. Dr. Chang was able to examine it as part of her research. "What strikes me about this footage," she said, "is that it's not from a personal device where manipulation would be relatively easy. This is from a professional security system with numerous safeguards against tampering. The footage is continuous, with no breaks. The timestamp is consistent. And what's shown is extremely detailed, 43 seconds of what appears to be the platform as it existed decades ago, complete with period-appropriate people going about their business." Dr. Chang's analysis found no evidence of manipulation. The footage appeared to be genuine, showing exactly what the security system recorded. Whether that meant the security camera had somehow captured an image from the past, or whether it meant the past had somehow briefly manifested in the present, Dr. Chang couldn't determine. But the footage represented one of the most compelling pieces of evidence she'd examined for temporal anomalies occurring at Union stations. Contemporary phenomena aren't limited to visual documentation. Audio recordings capture unexplained sounds. Electromagnetic field meters register anomalies. Thermal imaging shows temperature variations that have no apparent source. The array of modern technology allows for multifaceted documentation that gives researchers more data to work with than ever before. A 2023 investigation at Los Angeles Union Station, conducted by a team from UCLA's Parapsychology Research Group, deployed extensive monitoring equipment across multiple platforms. Over 3 nights, they recorded numerous anomalies. Temperature drops averaging 15 degrees in localized areas with no airflow to explain them. Electromagnetic spikes that correlated with reported feelings of unease or presence among researchers. Audio recordings that captured what appeared to be whispered voices speaking on frequencies just at the edge of human hearing. What we found was consistent with reports from these locations going back decades, explained Dr. Richard Torres, who led the investigation. But having modern equipment allowed us to quantify the phenomena in ways that weren't previously possible. We could measure exactly how much the temperature dropped, precisely when electromagnetic fields spiked, and at what frequencies the audio anomalies occurred. This gives us data, hard numbers that can be analyzed and compared with other investigations. But Dr. Torres was careful to note that data doesn't equal explanation. We can measure that something is happening, he said. We can document the environmental changes, but we still can't explain why these changes occur, what causes them, or what they mean. Are we measuring the effects of paranormal activity? Are we seeing natural phenomena that we don't yet understand? Are these technological artifacts anomalies in our equipment rather than in the environment? We don't know, and that's both frustrating and exciting. Social media has also created communities of people interested in Union Station phenomena. Reddit has multiple subreddits dedicated to discussing encounters, sharing footage, and planning investigations. These communities serve as support networks for people who've experienced unusual events and as research collaboratives where information is pooled and analyzed collectively. U/Midnight Platform, a Reddit user who moderates one such community, has compiled a database of contemporary Union Station encounters. As of early 2025, the database contains over 4,000 entries, ranging from brief, anomalous experiences to extensively documented encounters with apparent apparitions or temporal phenomena. Each entry includes date, location, description, and any available supporting evidence like photos or videos. What we're seeing, U/Midnight Platform explained in a detailed post, is that the phenomena are not declining. If anything, they're being reported more frequently than in previous decades. That could mean they're actually increasing, or it could simply mean that more people are comfortable reporting them now, thanks to social media, making it easier to share experiences without fear of being dismissed or ridiculed. Either way, the data suggests that Union Stations remain active sites for unusual phenomena. The database shows patterns that echo historical accounts. Certain platforms and areas experience more frequent phenomena. Late-night hours, particularly between midnight and 3 a.m., see the highest concentration of reports. Visual phenomena are most common, followed by audio experiences, then environmental effects like temperature changes or electromagnetic anomalies. And approximately 30% of reporters describe experiencing multiple types of phenomena simultaneously, suggesting that whatever causes these events can manifest in various forms. Contemporary investigations have also employed techniques unavailable to earlier researchers. Genetic analysis of allegedly anomalous biological samples, quantum field measurements, infrared and ultraviolet spectrum imaging. Each new technological capability offers potential new insights into phenomena that have puzzled investigators for generations. However, Dr. Hannah Frost, the parapsychologist mentioned in earlier sections, cautions against assuming that more technology equals better understanding. We have more data than ever, she noted, but we're not necessarily any closer to explaining what's happening, because the phenomena might not be technological in nature. They might not be physical in ways that our instruments can measure. And if that's the case, then accumulating more data using the same types of instruments might not get us any closer to answers. Dr. Frost advocates for a more experiential approach, combining technological documentation with detailed accounts of subjective experience. The people experiencing these phenomena report emotional and psychological components that instruments can't capture, she explained. Feelings of dread, sensations of being watched, temporal confusion, these are real experiences that matter, that might provide crucial insights into what's happening. But if we focus only on what we can measure with instruments, we miss huge portions of the actual phenomena. This tension between objective measurement and subjective experience runs through all contemporary paranormal research. Scientists want hard data, reproducible results, objective evidence. But experiencers insist that the subjective components, the feelings and impressions and personal impacts, are just as real and just as important as anything instruments can measure. Finding ways to honor both approaches, to take subjective experience seriously while also pursuing rigorous documentation, remains an ongoing challenge. What's clear is that Union Station phenomena continue to occur, that they're being documented more extensively than ever before, and that communities of people interested in understanding them are growing and becoming more sophisticated in their approaches. Whether this will ultimately lead to explanations, to solving mysteries that have persisted for over a century, remains to be seen. But the investigation continues, the documentation accumulates, and each new piece of evidence adds to our collective attempt to understand what's happening in these grand old buildings after the midnight hour, when a world grows quiet and the impossible becomes possible. Part 9. Theories and Explanations. After exploring accounts of Union Station phenomena, from apparitions to temporal anomalies to residual hauntings, a natural question emerges. What's actually happening? Is there a coherent explanation that can account for these diverse experiences, or do we need multiple explanations for different types of phenomena? Researchers have proposed various theories, ranging from conventional psychological explanations to cutting-edge physics, to frankly speculative ideas about consciousness and reality. Let's examine the major frameworks that attempt to make sense of Union Station mysteries. The psychological explanation is where skeptical researchers typically start. Human perception is fallible, prone to errors and illusions, especially under conditions of poor lighting, fatigue, isolation, and suggestion. Union stations after midnight provide exactly these conditions. Dim lighting creates shadows that can be misinterpreted as figures. Isolation and the eerie atmosphere of empty public spaces prime people to expect unusual experiences. Fatigue affects perception and judgment. And suggestion, whether from ghost stories or previous witnesses' accounts, can shape what people think they're seeing or hearing. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a cognitive psychologist who studies paranormal beliefs, has written extensively about how these factors combine to produce experiences that feel genuinely supernatural but have purely psychological origins. The human brain is a pattern detection machine, she explained in a 2020 paper. We're constantly trying to make sense of ambiguous stimuli to find meaningful patterns in random noise. In environments like Union stations at night, where stimuli are sparse and ambiguous, our brains work overtime to construct interpretations. And those interpretations are influenced by our expectations, our beliefs, our cultural conditioning about ghosts and hauntings. Dr. Walsh points to studies showing that people who believe in the paranormal are more likely to interpret ambiguous experiences as supernatural, while skeptics tend to find conventional explanations for the same experiences. This suggests that belief itself shapes perception, that what we expect to see influences what we actually perceive. This doesn't mean witnesses are lying or stupid, Dr. Walsh emphasized. It means they're human. We all experience the world through interpretive filters. None of us has direct, unmediated access to reality. We construct our experience based on sensory input filtered through expectations and beliefs. And in certain contexts, that constructive process can produce experiences that feel utterly real but don't correspond to objective events. This explanation is compelling for many reported phenomena. Shadows mistaken for figures. Sound from building systems interpreted as footsteps or voices. The sensation of being watched, which can be produced by subclinical anxiety in empty spaces. These psychological factors likely account for some portion of Union Station experiences. But the psychological explanation struggles with certain types of evidence. Multiple witnesses experiencing identical phenomena simultaneously. Security footage capturing events that match witness descriptions. Physical evidence, like the objects found after the 1982 fog incident. Documented temperature drops and electromagnetic anomalies that correspond with reported experiences. These objective findings suggest that at least some Union Station phenomena can't be reduced to misperception or psychological construction. The electromagnetic field theory proposes that exposure to certain electromagnetic frequencies can affect human perception and emotional states, producing sensations and even hallucinations that feel like paranormal encounters. Research has shown that electromagnetic fields in specific frequency ranges, particularly infrasound below the threshold of hearing, can induce feelings of unease, the sense of a presence in a room, even visual hallucinations. Dr. Elena Vasquez's research documented electromagnetic anomalies at several Union stations, particularly on platforms associated with frequent paranormal reports. These findings support the theory that electromagnetic conditions might be contributing to unusual experiences. Old electrical systems, underground power lines, even the electromagnetic fields generated by train movements could create local EM environments that affect people's perceptions. We know that the human brain operates through electrical signals, Dr. Vasquez explained. It's not unreasonable to think that external electromagnetic fields could interfere with normal brain function, producing unusual experiences. This could explain why phenomena cluster in certain areas, if those areas have unusual electromagnetic conditions. And it could explain why experiences vary, if people's sensitivity to electromagnetic effects differs. However, like the psychological explanation, the electromagnetic theory doesn't account for all documented phenomena. It might explain why people feel uneasy or see things that aren't there, but doesn't explain security footage capturing apparent apparitions or the documented cases of temporal travelers like Aaron Wilson. Unless we propose that electromagnetic fields can somehow affect electronic equipment as well as human perception, creating artifacts and security footage that look like people who aren't there. But this seems to require electromagnetic effects far beyond what current physics recognizes. The quantum mechanics approach ventures into more speculative territory. Some physicists have proposed that phenomena we categorize as paranormal might represent quantum effects manifesting at the macroscopic scale. Quantum mechanics already includes strange concepts like entanglement, where particles remain connected regardless of distance, and superposition, where systems exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Dr. Shannon Brooks, mentioned earlier in connection with temporal anomalies, has explored whether Union stations might represent what she calls quantum coherent spaces, areas where quantum effects don't average out to produce normal classical physics, but instead persist at scales where humans can experience them. Quantum mechanics tells us that reality at the smallest scales is probabilistic, not deterministic, Dr. Brooks explained. Particles don't have definite positions or properties until they're measured. They exist in superposition in all possible states simultaneously. Now, normally, when you scale up from individual particles to objects we can see and touch, all these quantum probabilities average out. Quantum weirdness disappears, and we get normal classical physics. But what if there are locations where this averaging process is incomplete, where quantum effects can persist and even manifest at scales we can observe? This would be an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence. And currently, we don't have conclusive evidence that macroscopic quantum effect can occur in the way Dr. Brooks proposes. But she argues that anomalous phenomena at locations like Union stations might represent exactly such effects, and that dismissing them without investigation means potentially missing genuine quantum physics happening on a scale we've never observed before. I'm not saying this explanation is definitely correct, Dr. Brooks emphasized. I'm saying it's worth investigating. Because if I'm right, if these locations do represent quantum coherent spaces, then they're invaluable natural laboratories for studying quantum mechanics in ways that would be impossible to create artificially. And if I'm wrong, if there's some other explanation, we'll only discover that by doing the research, not by assuming these phenomena can't be real. The consciousness-based theories propose that paranormal phenomena might be related to properties of consciousness itself rather than to physical effects. These theories suggest that consciousness, rather than being merely a product of brain activity, might have its own reality, its own effects on the physical world, particularly under certain conditions. Dr. Hannah Frost has written about what she calls consciousness imprinting, the idea that intense mental or emotional states can leave traces in the environment. We know that consciousness is associated with physical effects, Dr. Frost noted. Brain activity produces measurable electromagnetic fields. The observer effect in quantum mechanics shows that consciousness and measurement are somehow connected to physical outcomes. So, is it really so impossible that very intense conscious experiences could leave marks on physical space, particularly in locations where countless people have had intense experiences over many decades? This theory would explain residual hauntings, those recurring phenomena that seem to replay without conscious awareness. The intense emotions of Elizabeth Chun watching her husband depart for war might have imprinted on Platform 7 at Los Angeles Union Station, creating a resonance that periodically manifests as the sound of crying. The daily routines of maintenance workers walking the same paths for decades might have worn grooves into the fabric of space, creating residual phenomena that continue to play out long after the people are gone. But consciousness-based theories face the challenge of mechanism. How exactly would consciousness imprint on the environment? What physical process would allow emotions or repeated actions to create lasting effects? Without answers to these questions, consciousness theories remain interesting ideas without solid grounding in established science. The interdimensional hypothesis ventures into the most speculative territory, proposing that Union Station phenomena might involve intersections with parallel dimensions or alternate realities. This would explain temporal anomalies, people appearing from different time periods, and the sense that Union Stations exist in spaces where normal reality rules don't fully apply. Some theoretical physics models, particularly string theory and M-theory, do propose the existence of additional dimensions beyond the four we experience. But these extra dimensions are typically described as being extremely small, curled up at quantum scales, not accessible to macroscopic objects like human beings. However, a few physicists have explored whether there might be locations where boundaries between dimensions or parallel realities are thinner, more permeable. If Union Stations represented such locations, it could explain why people from different times or even different versions of reality occasionally appear there, slipping through weak points in the dimensional boundaries. This is highly speculative, admitted Dr. Marcus Chun, a theoretical physicist who's written about dimensional boundaries. We have no confirmed evidence that parallel dimensions exist in any form that would allow the kinds of phenomena reported at Union stations. But the mathematical frameworks of modern physics do allow for these possibilities. And if we dismiss accounts of temporal anomalies and dimensional crossings without investigation, we might be missing evidence of physics that's more exotic and interesting than anything we've yet discovered. The truth is that none of these explanations fully accounts for all reported Union Station phenomena. Psychological factors surely play a role in some experiences. Electromagnetic effects might contribute to others. Quantum mechanics and consciousness theories offer intriguing frameworks, but lack conclusive supporting evidence. And the interdimensional hypothesis, while exciting to contemplate, requires accepting possibilities that go well beyond established physics. Perhaps the answer involves multiple explanations, different phenomena having different causes. Some experiences might be purely psychological. Others might result from electromagnetic effects. A few might represent genuine anomalies, effects that current science doesn't fully understand, whether those effects involve quantum mechanics, consciousness, or something else entirely. Dr. Alan Foster, a researcher who spent 40 years investigating paranormal claims, has concluded that the phenomena are real, but that our current frameworks are inadequate to explain them. I've investigated hundreds of allegedly haunted locations, he said in a 2019 interview. And what I've learned is that something genuinely unusual does occur at certain places, including Union stations. But it's not ghosts in the traditional sense. It's not demons or spirits or anything from traditional supernatural frameworks. It's something that's natural, that follows rules, that can be studied, but that we don't yet have the tools or concepts to understand properly. Foster advocates for what he calls anomaly studies, treating paranormal phenomena as data about reality that doesn't fit current models, without prejudging whether the phenomena are supernatural or simply poorly understood natural effects. We need to stop arguing about whether these things are possible, Foster argues, and start seriously investigating what they are. Because they are something. People experience them. Instruments detect them. They occur with consistency and pattern. So let's figure out what they actually are instead of wasting time debating whether they could be. This pragmatic approach, focusing on documentation and investigation rather than belief or dismissal, represents perhaps the most productive path forward. Whether Union Station phenomena ultimately prove to be psychological, electromagnetic, quantum mechanical, or something completely unexpected, the only way we'll know is through careful, serious research that takes the experiences seriously while also maintaining scientific rigor. The questions remain open. The mysteries persist. In Union Station, with its platforms stretching into darkness, its corridors echoing with sounds that might be from now or might be from decades past, continues to challenge our understanding, to resist easy explanation, and to remind us that the world is stranger, more mysterious, and more interesting than our current frameworks can fully capture. Part 10. The journey continues. As our journey through Union Station's mysteries draws to a close, we find ourselves not with answers, but with deeper questions, not with certainty, but with wonder. And perhaps that's as it should be. The greatest mysteries aren't the ones we solve, but the ones that continue to intrigue us, that resist our attempts at understanding, that remind us how much we still don't know about the world we inhabit. Union Station exists in multiple states simultaneously. It's a functional transportation hub, a piece of practical infrastructure designed to move people from one place to another. But it's also a monument to history, architectural treasure that connects us to earlier generations. And in the hours after midnight, it transforms into something else entirely, a liminal space where past and present overlap, where the boundaries we think are solid reveal themselves to be permeable, where the impossible becomes possible. The people who work in these stations, who spend their nights walking empty platforms and darkened corridors, they know truths that daylight visitors never encounter. They know that Union Station has secrets, that it whispers stories from decades past, that it holds mysteries in its vast waiting rooms and beneath its aging architecture. They know this not because they're credulous or superstitious, but because they've experienced it night after night, year after year, until the strange becomes familiar and the impossible becomes simply part of the job. And what do these mysteries tell us? Perhaps they tell us that consciousness, time, and reality itself are far stranger than our everyday experience suggests. Perhaps they tell us that history isn't just something that happened, but something that in some sense continues to happen, echoing through the spaces where it occurred. Perhaps they tell us that we're surrounded by layers of experience, of existence, that we normally can't perceive, but that become visible under certain conditions, in certain places to certain people. Or perhaps, more humbly, they simply tell us that we don't know. That for all our science and technology, for all our sophisticated understanding of physics and psychology, there remain corners of experience that resist explanation, phenomena that challenge our models, encounters that don't fit into the categories we've constructed. And that's okay. Mystery has value. Wonder has value. The experience of confronting something that defies your understanding, that makes you question your assumptions about reality, that's valuable even if it never leads to complete explanation. Because it keeps us humble, keeps us curious, keeps us open to possibilities we might otherwise dismiss. If you find yourself in Union Station after midnight, waiting for a late train, or simply passing through during the quiet hours, pay attention. Notice the sounds, the shadows, the way the space feels when crowds aren't filling it with noise and motion. Notice the architecture, how the grand old buildings create spaces that feel outside normal time, that connect you to everyone who's ever waited on these platforms, who's ever walked these corridors. And if you experience something unusual, something you can't quite explain, know that you're part of a tradition stretching back over a century. You're joining the countless witnesses who've stood where you stand and seen things that shouldn't be there, heard sounds that have no source, felt the boundaries of normal reality growing thin. Document your experience if you can. Share it if you're comfortable doing so. Add your story to the growing collection of Union Station mysteries, to the shadow history running parallel to the official records. Because every account matters. Every experience adds to our collective attempt to understand what's happening in these remarkable places. But most importantly, let the experience affect you. Let it expand your sense of what's possible. Let it remind you that the world is deeper and stranger than you usually allow yourself to acknowledge. Let it reawaken that sense of wonder that children have naturally, but adults often lose, that recognition that reality is mysterious, that existence is amazing, that we're surrounded by things we don't understand and probably never will. Because in the end, that might be the greatest gift Union Station offers. Not answers, but questions. Not certainty, but mystery. Not explanation, but wonder. And in a world that often feels completely mapped, entirely explained, utterly understood, a genuine mystery is a precious thing, worth preserving, worth celebrating, worth carrying with us as we board our trains and journey onward into the unknown. The platforms stretch into darkness. The echoes continue. The mysteries wait. In Union Station, grand and aging and full of secrets, stands as it has for over a century, a gateway between worlds, a keeper of stories, a place where time itself might be just another passenger passing through, where yesterday and today and tomorrow converge, where the living and the dead, the present and the past, the real and the impossible all share the same space, all exist in the same breath, all wait together on platforms that lead to destinations not marked on any map. Sleep well, traveler. And if you dream of grand halls with soaring ceilings, of platforms extending into fog, of trains arriving from impossible directions, know that you're not alone. Others have dreamed these dreams. Others have walked these paths. And somewhere, in a station that might be Chicago or Los Angeles or Washington or Kansas City or all of them at once, the midnight train is pulling into the platform, its destination unknown, its passengers mysterious, its journey continuing into the beautiful, terrible, endlessly fascinating mystery of existence itself. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the mysteries of Union Station. If you enjoyed exploring these stories with us tonight, please remember to subscribe to Mystic Sleep Tales so you never miss our next night's adventure. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment letting us know where you're listening from, what time it is, and if there are any mysteries, stories, or historical events you'd like us to explore in future episodes. Your suggestions help guide us on our journey through the strange and wonderful corners of our world. Until next time, sleep soundly, dream deep dreams, and remember that the most extraordinary stories are often hidden in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. Remember that it's the first day of the rest of your life. Good night.